Timeless Assassin by author Raj_Shah_7152. Chapter 251-275. Twin Fang City, Guild District, early afternoon. Leo spent the hours before his meeting in quiet observation, wandering the interlocked alleyways and ring roads of the Guild District. He kept to the shadows, not out of fear, but out of habit, as his eyes lingered on the local architecture, monuments built to glorify assassins, and murals painted in muted reds depicting legendary kills. He stopped by the outer markets next, where blacksmiths hawked lightweight daggers and silence-enhancing footwear, and where a booth selling toxin-resistant gloves sat right beside another offering heart-stopping candy disguised as children's treats. No one here asked questions and everyone watched their own back, as Leo felt oddly at home. Twin Fang City, Venom Lily Bistro, 1:57 p.m. Leo arrived at the designated meeting point a few minutes ahead of schedule. The restaurant was subtle but elegant, lit by flickering blue crystals and shielded behind soundproof walls. Table 22, the table he was told to meet Mr. Raiden at, sat near the rear corner, far from the main entrance, making it an ideal spot for a conversation that wasn't meant to be overheard. And to his surprise, Mr. Raiden seemed to already be there, waiting for him. Raiden was a bald man with deep laugh lines and a warm, disarming smile. His loose dark robes gave the illusion of a merchant or scribe, but Leo could feel the restraint in his posture, the kind honed by decades of dangerous stillness. "You must be Leo," Raiden said, rising slightly and offering a handshake. "Welcome to the Black Serpents." Leo returned the handshake with a nod, but said nothing. "I saw you at the Interstellar Circuit Finals," Raiden continued, gesturing for Leo to sit. "Of course myself and everyone else in the guild were rooting for young Master Darnell to win over you, ha ha ha, but we can't deny your brilliance." "You fought well," Raiden said, as Leo didn't reply, but rather just offered the faintest smile as he settled into his chair. Raiden then poured them both water before getting to business. "The Serpents are a free guild," he began. "We don't chain our members down. In any given calendar year, you're only expected to complete 2 missions of your choice to keep your membership active. And there are no mandatory deployments or suicide orders that you must follow." Leo raised a brow, mildly intrigued. "There's a public mission board updated daily," Raiden continued, with each task marked clearly by risk and reward. "95% of what we do here is assassination, the clean, untraceable, and discreet kind. Object retrieval and kidnappings are rare, but constitute the remaining 5%. While escort and dungeon work, we don't touch that trash here at all." Leo nodded, absorbing every word. "The guild offers all its members some perks such as discounted access to weapons, poisons, black market materials. And more importantly, a mission board that never runs dry. You'll never beg for work here." Raiden leaned back. "Most of us work solo. That's the norm. But if the guild comes under threat, you'll see a miracle, as loners band to become legions overnight. When Darnell Nuna was taken, hundreds of thousands volunteered to help. That's the bond we share. Not obedience, but loyalty." He took a sip from his glass. "Also our reputation in the universe is rock solid. The reason no one in the outer galaxies dares touch a black serpent is because the consequences never one blade. If one of us dies on a mission, 3 more are sent, as the message is clear, success is inevitable, and the price for killing a serpent will be returned in kind." Leo's expression didn't change, but a flicker of approval passed through his eyes. Raiden smiled. "Right now, you're free to do whatever you want. No pressure. But if you need anything at all, you come to me as I'm your designated point of contact for your newbie year." He paused, then added, "And if you're hungry for something dangerous, I'll be leading an expedition in 7 days. Big risks, bigger rewards. You've got 6 days to decide if you want in." Leo met his eyes and gave a respectful nod. "I'll keep that in mind. I guess that's it. Feel free to check out the headquarters and the guild's mess hall where most of the veterans have a permanent table they hang out at. Also don't forget to visit the missions hall. See if there's anything you like there. You need to only complete 2 in a year's time and they can be of any difficulty, so the choice is yours. Usually we don't kick out members for failed missions, but try and maintain a success rate of 75% or more, because otherwise it won't reflect well on your evaluation CV when bonus seasons roll around. I sincerely hope you enjoy your time here, Raiden said as he stood up to leave, with Leo doing the same. The two shared a handshake, and Raiden left a handful of money on the table although the duo had ordered nothing but water, before walking out, as he did not hang around for more chit-chat. Man, I like this place, Leo thought once Raiden left, as contrary to the Rodova mess hall, the atmosphere within the Venom Lily Bistro was entirely different. Apart from the very soft instrumental music playing in the background to prevent sensory deprivation, there was not a single noise in his vicinity, as all the guests sitting within the restaurant seemed to be dining in absolute silence and without peeping into other people's dishes. Even Raiden, who talked kindly enough to him, did not seem interested in small talk, as after saying what he needed, he left immediately without ceremony, showing how practical people were around here. Since this was precisely the type of crowd Leo approved of, he couldn't help but break into a soft smile as he walked out of the restaurant, as although he had joined the Black Serpents Guild for the sole purpose of regaining his memories, he could see himself staying here for a while if he had nothing urgent to do in the short term. After his meeting with Raiden concluded, Leo began looking for his assigned residential quarters in the outer ring, where he had been assigned housing like all new recruits. His designated quarters were located on the 5th floor of a modest brick building nestled between a weapons merchant and a silent meditation dojo. The hallways were clean but plain, and his room, Unit 5C, was equally unremarkable, having only a single bed, a reinforced mana-proof desk, a wall-mounted combat dummy, and a wardrobe containing 2 spare guild bath robes. After putting his duffel bag on the floor and locking the entrance door behind him, the first thing that Leo did was to search the apartment for surveillance crystals or voice transmission arrays. However, he found nothing of the sort. The Black Serpents did not seem to keep an eye on their guild members, making his apartment home a safe environment for him to call Mian Fei. I hope she picks up, Leo thought, as he retrieved the communication crystal Fei had given him before his departure from Rodova, and softly injected his mana inside it, until the crystal ball started to glow blue. Twin Fang City, Black Serpents Guild Residential Quarters, Unit 5C. The communication crystal glowed softly in Leo's hand, its blue hue intensifying as it absorbed more and more of his mana to establish a connection. Once the mana input stabilized and the receiver accepted the call, the projection shimmered, then took form. The woman who appeared on the other side was no longer Instructor Mian Fei of Rodova Academy. Gone were the prim academy clothes and the carefully placed makeup, as in her place stood Mu Fan, red-haired and radiant, dressed in the sleek tactical robes of the Mu clan's covert operatives, her expression calm and cautious. "Did you do it?" she asked without preamble, eyes locked onto his. "Did you get accepted into the Serpents?" Leo tilted the crystal slightly, revealing the unadorned walls and training dummy behind him. "I did," he replied coolly. They didn't even ask for a physical or psychological evaluation. Apparently, my name was enough to impress them. Mu Fan let out a quiet, bitter chuckle, one laced with a trace of disbelief and just a hint of resentment. Does he have any idea how many cult agents, trained, disciplined, transcendent tier had tried and failed to infiltrate the Black Serpents? How many operatives had been turned away at the gates by a background check they couldn't hack, because while not suspicious they weren't squeaky clean to the guild's liking? And yet here he was. Accepted without scrutiny. Because of fame. She shook her head, but didn't let the thought show on her face. "Good," she said instead, her tone softening. "That's really good." As for the first time in days, she smiled a genuine smile. "Tell me your room number. I'll come see you tonight." Leo's eyes narrowed just slightly, but he didn't hesitate. Unit 5C. Outer Ring, Guild Housing Block 4. "Keep your schedule clear," Mu Fan added, her tone dipping into something more serious. "It may take me a while to restore your memories." Leo gave a single sharp nod, and said, "Understood," as the projection flickered once more, and then vanished. He lowered the crystal, knowing full well that the moment of truth was arriving fast. It was finally time for him to become whole again. Dash 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 dash. Knock, knock. Around 8 p.m. that same night, Leo heard a soft knock at his door. When he opened it, he was greeted by a version of Mu Fan he could barely recognize. Gone was the modest attire of the Rodova instructor he once knew. In its place were the dark, high-collared robes of the Mu family, layered with leather straps and bracers, each one holding a weapon in place, daggers across her chest, throwing needles lining her thigh holsters, and a slender black baton sheathed neatly at her hip. She didn't look like an educator anymore. She looked like a war-ready assassin. Leo gave her a once-over, and then another, slower one. "You quit teaching at Rodova?" he asked, stepping aside as he gestured for her to enter. Fan nodded as she crossed the threshold. "Yes, I was only there for you. Now that you're gone, I have no reason to stay," she said flatly. "I submitted my resignation the same day you left." Without another word, she immediately began sweeping the room, checking corners, baseboards, seams, and faint mana signatures for any surveillance crystals or sound transmission arrays, mirroring the same systematic sweep Leo had done when he first arrived. "It's clear," she said eventually, stepping back from the wall, before nodding toward the bed and gesturing for Leo to sit. Squeak. The mattress let out a faint groan as Leo sat down. He leaned slightly forward, resting his arms on his knees, his eyes locking onto hers with quiet curiosity as a faint, lopsided grin crept onto his lips. "Am I going to remember something painful?" he asked, as Fan shook her head slowly, but her expression didn't exactly comfort him. "I'm just the keeper," she said. "I hold the memories, not the emotions. I don't get to see what's inside, so I can't say if they'll hurt." She paused, and her voice dropped a pitch. "But I can tell you this, once your memories come back, you won't be calm. You'll be angry, restless. Because once you understand the truth, once you see how small a pawn you were in the bigger game, you'll remember exactly why you chose to carry this burden in the first place. Why you were willing to risk everything, for your family." Leo exhaled slowly, his grin fading like vapor. There was a tightness in his chest, but it seemed smothered beneath something deeper, something akin to desperation. He was tired of the fog in his mind, tired of chasing fragments of identity in half-memories and instinct. He wanted to become whole again, even if it hurt. Hence, after letting out a deep sigh, he signaled for Fan to go ahead as he closed his eyes with conviction. Fan moved sharply and placed the memory retrieval cap onto his head. She pressed 2 fingers to its side, then began feeding her mana into the device in slow, precise pulses. "Your memories were extracted in sequence," she said gently. "So you'll remember them in sequence. Don't resist. Let them play out like a movie. You'll know everything you need to by the end." And with that, it began. Memories long buried began to stir, rising like smoke from deep within his mind, as the fog started to thin, and the truth started to play out. Dash 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 dash. The first distinct memory that Leo recalled was that of a toy. A small white elephant figurine, worn around the edges from years of nibbling, that he used to chew on endlessly for reasons even he, in hindsight, couldn't explain. It had been a gift from his father, a tall, broad-shouldered military man named Jacob, whose calloused hands had always been gentle when placing the toy in his chubby little palms. It was that same elephant he often shared with his older brother, Luke, during their long play sessions on a fuzzy blue carpet in the living room. Luke would make the toy fly, while Leo tried to catch it with clumsy fingers, laughing endlessly, even when he fell over. Their mother, Elena, watched over them like a sunlit goddess, her warm laughter always ringing from the kitchen, where she cooked meals that smelled like home. The taste of her honey-glazed vegetables, the rhythm of her lullabies, and the way she pulled him into soft, crushing hugs every night were so vivid now, so heartbreakingly real, that Leo felt his breath hitch. Back then, the world was whole. His brother protected him like a shield and encouraged him like a teacher. His mother fed him love in every form: food, warmth, stories. And his father, though stern and rarely home, always ruffled his hair before leaving, always whispering, "Take care of them while I'm gone." Recalling all that, a single tear of joy slipped from Leo's closed eye, as Fan watched him recall the best parts of his life with a satisfied smile. Childhood was often the happiest and most carefree time of one's life, a kind of pleasant calm, before the storm of adulthood began. While his childhood memories were mostly happy, and he seemed to be living in relative wealth, all of that changed abruptly when he grew a little older and his father went missing. Leo was still in elementary school when it happened. One day his father was there, tucking him in, telling him to take care of his mother. The next, he was simply gone, without explanation or goodbye. In the weeks that followed, their existing life collapsed like a house of cards. His brother and mother were soon forced to relocate from their mansion when they couldn't afford to pay the mortgage anymore, and they were instead forced to trade it in for a creaky two-bedroom apartment with water-stained walls and neighbors who argued through the night. However, that was only the beginning of their downfall. Next year, both Leo and Luke had to change schools. While Elena soon constantly found herself turning down bills, rationing meals, and doing everything she could to shield her sons from the full weight of their fall. Leo remembered watching her cry quietly the day she sold her necklace and wedding jewelry. And he remembered how she never once cursed their father's name or spoke ill of him. Even at her lowest, she bore the downfall of their family with grace, as watching her suffer like that, Leo changed. Gone was the loud, spoiled boy who threw tantrums for toys, and in his place stood a quiet, observant young man who kept his head low, learned to eat in silence, and stopped asking for things. He endured what many common children did, such as being mugged for pocket change, bullied in school for his worn shoes, and laughed at when he couldn't afford school trip fees. But he adapted. He learned to be content with less. That phase of his life continued until Luke turned 18 and began working odd jobs to support them, and 2 years later, he himself followed suit, joining the workforce the moment he legally could, as things began to improve for their family, if only slightly. But then, the world ended. Planet Earth, already battered by frequent earthquakes, cyclones, flash floods, and atmospheric decay, was officially declared uninhabitable. The president made the announcement informing the common people that the world was ending, and with it came news of an interstellar migration plan aboard a massive alien ship. Mass hysteria soon followed, as the local governments worldwide informed their intentions of evacuating just 1 out of the 8 billion people living on Earth in the first tranche, with the others being forced to live on the dying planet, until the next round of ships arrived to evacuate them a year later. For Leo and Luke, 2 no-name repairmen, the dream of securing a spot on that ship was impossible. But their mother made it possible, by selling her kidney to raise money for the ticket. She bought them the cheapest tickets, cramped, windowless pods in the lowest class of evacuees. But it was still a way out. A path to planet Terra Nova, the galaxy's new frontier. And so, their journey began. Once aboard the transport ship, daily chores were mixed with compulsory training inside a hyper-realistic VR game called Terra Nova Online, which was a simulation meant to prepare Earth's migrants for the climate, culture, and economy of their destination planet. The in-game currency and skills learned also carried to the real world, making it so that the better one was at playing the game, the more influence they could carry into the real world upon landing. But here fate played a trick. Due to a glitch, or perhaps some calculation by the gaming system that he did not understand, Leo's character was forcibly assigned the role of the biggest big shot from the very start, when he was nothing more than a small fry, as he adopted the moniker, the boss. At the time the system forcibly portrayed him as the top player who was at the very top of the player rankings, although he was not really that skilled. The twist in this situation was that if the truth behind his fake strength was ever exposed, he would lose his life. And so, he faked it. He wore the fake ranking-like armor, and paraded like a king among lions, and bluffed his way into respect. However, what began as an act soon turned real, as through tireless effort and relentless survival, he mastered every skill he once pretended to have, as eventually, the boss, became more than a role. With the persona becoming him, and him becoming the boss. Along the way, he gained many friends. Such as Amanda, his girlfriend, first love and hopeful future wife. Chaosbringer, the manager of his empire and his right-hand man. Ben Faulkner, his assassin instructor, second father and master. And Dumpy, his pet, who he hatched from a lottery egg, and who the universal government was currently nurturing at some untold facility, until he retrieved him. It was an eventful journey, and he managed to reach the status of a master warrior by the end, becoming one of the best players to ever play the game. However, this was where the light in his memories began to fade. Because it was from this point forward that every problem he now faced began to unravel. It was only towards the end of his journey that he realized that the Earthen government's promise of a green new world and a fresh new start wasn't actually true. That the locals of planet Terra Nova were not actually evacuating them out of a dying planet because of the kindness in their hearts, but because they needed more workers and soldiers to keep their economy booming and front lines secured. If he wanted to, he could have kept his mouth shut and taken a hefty payday to keep the information he knew concealed. However, out of the kindness of his heart, he exposed the ploy to every Earthen migrant, and in the process became the enemy of the local government of planet Terra Nova. The Terra Nova government, now mad at him for making them suffer potential losses of millions of MP, sued him for leaking state secrets and registered a case against him in the Universal Court, branding him as a criminal. And the fate that he was ideally to suffer upon landing was one of being handcuffed and arrested. However, a sudden interest by the Mu clan into his skills and performance opened a way out for him from this mess. Apparently, Mu Fan contacted the captain of the ship before landing, and hatched a plan to save him from his arrest. However, the catch was that he had to be separated from his family in the short term, as Mu Fan could only safely manage to evacuate one person at a time, and besides, it wasn't his family that was wanted, but rather just him. And so, upon landing, he found himself evading the local authorities waiting to arrest him, by hiding in a transport cart carrying ship's command logs and internal data slates, until he found Mu Fan at their designated meet-up spot. However, midway through his escape, as he asked Mu Fan as to what would become of his family, Mu Fan replied that they would most likely be arrested and interrogated in the short term, before being released later on. And it was here that Leo suddenly changed his mind and decided that he did not wish to leave without them, as this was where everything turned to hell. Leo abandoned Mu Fan's guidance midway through their escape, feeling convinced that he did not need her. He believed he knew better. Believed he was still untouchable. In his mind, he was still the boss's, the strongest player in the system, the king among men. But that illusion he had about his power was about to shatter big time. As in the real world, a master, ranked warrior was barely a blip on the power scale. Nothing more than a bottom feeder and a plebeian. However, blinded by arrogance and narcissistic self-confidence, Leo marched back toward the Ark ship, determined to safeguard his family's interests, only to be intercepted and arrested before he could even make it halfway. The local authorities didn't just apprehend him. They made an example out of him, by beating, mocking, and torturing him like a criminal whose pride far exceeded his value. It was during this phase of his life that Leo truly remembered what it meant to be humble. What it meant to live like the forgotten, to survive on the fringes where dignity was a luxury and violence was a daily routine. As thrown into one of Terra Nova's most brutal prisons, Leo faced unimaginable struggles from the moment he stepped inside. Stabbings, murders, and hand-to-hand death matches were not isolated events but daily entertainment for the inmates. As he was cast among the filth of the planet, the absolute worst humanity had to offer, and if he wanted to survive, he had no choice but to adapt quickly. So he became resourceful. He learned to stay alert, to sleep lightly, and to watch every corner as if his life depended on it, because most days, it did. But even caution could only take him so far, as despite his best efforts, he was still roughed up almost every other day as his attitude as the boss only made things worse. It did not intimidate the other prisoners, not when he was barely a master-level warrior, but rather provoked them and made them want to break his spirit that much more. Eventually, desperation began to seep in. Leo knew that he needed to find a way out, any way out, and fast. And finally, he found a sliver of hope when an inmate mentioned the warden's genetic trials. The rumor went that the prison warden was the disciple of a twisted genetic scientist who had vanished from public records. However, as his chief disciple, the warden continued his legacy through underground experiments on selected inmates of his own, promising freedom to any who survived his testing. Most didn't. But Leo volunteered anyway. Because even the smallest chance to escape this hell and reunite with his family was better than the certainty of death he was facing in this prison. And so, he was taken away by the warden and tested for his genetic makeup first, with the discovery being nothing short of shocking for even the warden himself. Leo not only carried the blood of a god, but also carried the blood of an ancient dragon, in what was the most unique genetic makeup he had ever seen. Turning obsessed, the warden treated Leo as his most precious subject and even contacted his master the mad scientist to collaborate on testing, which his master agreed happily to, because his master, just like him, could not resist the temptation of testing on such a unique specimen. And so began the suboptimal genetic trials on his body, as it was these two mad idiots, who first had the crazy idea of introducing a mana heart into his body. Flashback, an underground testing facility, somewhere on planet Terra Nova. Leo found himself strapped naked to a cold, metal operating table, his limbs bound with thick restraints that pulsed faintly with suppressive mana. The air around him stank of iron, antiseptic, and burnt flesh, while the ceiling above was lined with harsh, white lights that flickered occasionally, revealing glimpses of overhead observation lenses and rune-carved ducts dripping with condensation. The laboratory itself was a horror show masquerading as science. Tall glass tanks filled with semi-formed creatures lined the walls, some twitching feebly in their nutrient fluids, others still as death. Dissected organs floated in containment pods, while machines whirred and hissed at uneven intervals, many cobbled together from different technologies, biotech, monotech, alien alloys, all held in place with rusted bolts and makeshift bindings. Two voices echoed from behind a thick pane of observation glass, bickering non-stop about how to progress with the experiment. The blood of the god running through him is very thin, one of them said. It's been through at least 15 generations of thinning. If not for the trace of dragon blood mixed into his body, it wouldn't have triggered any reaction at all. You're wrong, the second voice countered, sharper and more excitable. It's the other way around. It's the god blood that activated the dormant dragon lineage. The dragon blood is even thinner than the divine strain. It only reacted after he learned how to absorb and circulate mana. The two are synergistic, each amplifies the other. What a waste, the first muttered. The boy grew up on a mana-less planet. I wonder how many generations of his family lived and died without ever knowing what flowed through their veins. Exactly why we must enrich it. Before any other experiments, we'll need to clone his stem cells, concentrate the traits we want, and then re-infuse his body with higher quality blood. That will make him more receptive to the genetic awakening serum later. Fool. We should be implanting a forced mana nucleus now. Stabilizing his core first, so that it will yield faster results. No. That comes after. First we strengthen the source. You don't build a tower on rotting flesh. Their bickering intensified, voices overlapping and echoing with frustration as Leo, through the haze of pain and sedatives, could only make out pieces, but they were enough. He had the blood of a god in his veins. And dragon blood too. At the time, he didn't know what that meant. He didn't think of his parents as divine or draconic, nor did he believe his lineage was anything more than human. But apparently, buried somewhere in his ancestral code, was a rare and volatile combination. Eventually, the debate ended, and action began. Wires were attached to his neck, arms, and chest. The hum of blood-cycling machines filled the room, followed by the sting of multiple insertion needles. His body began to shudder as his natural blood was extracted and replaced, slowly, systematically, with a synthetic version engineered from his own cells. This new blood retained only the attributes the scientists considered valuable, while it was purged of everything else. The process was brutal. His body rejected the new blood almost immediately after insertion. His muscles clenched, vision blurred, and every cell screamed out in resistance as it recognized the infusion as foreign. But Leo endured. Through sheer willpower, and the fact that his DNA still held enough compatibility to the new blood, however slight it may be, his body began to adapt. It was neither easy nor graceful. But with the stubborn determination of someone who wanted to live and return to his family anyhow, Leo somehow survived the transfusion. Leo had only just begun to recover from the blood transfusion when the voices around him grew louder, sharper, more frantic. "It's the boy's family. They're trying to rescue him. Don't stop them, call off the guards. Let them walk into the chamber willingly. If we contain them, we can test all of them at once," one of the scientists said, his tone brimming with twisted excitement. The words struck Leo like a bolt of lightning, every warning bell in his mind going off at once. Why are they here? He thought, panic creeping in, as he began to restlessly struggle against his binds. "It's too late," the second voice replied in a rising pitch. "There's no intercom, no way to contact them from here. I'd have to run to stop them manually." "You fool. I told you 100 times to install basic intercoms. You're a disgrace of a disciple." The first snapped. "I'm sorry, Master. I'm unworthy. Don't bow, run. Try to salvage the specimens if you can." Leo heard the hurried clatter of footsteps as one of them sprinted away. He began to thrash against his restraints, heart pounding, breath quickening. His body was still weak, but the thought of his family walking into the same nightmare as him lit a fire inside him that overpowered pain and exhaustion alike. "Arg, stop squirming, you rat. Looks like your sedative is wearing off," the first voice said, as he walked towards Leo to give him yet another sedative injection. However, before he could, Leo suddenly broke free from one of his restraints, and used his free hand to break free of another. "Don't touch my family," he lashed out in anger, as he jumped onto the frightened scientist and placed him in a chokehold, slowly draining the life out of him. "Gura, Kyak." Squirming and thrashing, the scientist tried to claw at his arm with trembling fingers, his legs kicking weakly against the floor, but his resistance only prompted Leo to tighten the choke even more. Leo's body was still trembling from the blood transfusion, every nerve raw, but his fury was stronger than his pain. He didn't let go. Not until the scientist's limbs were twitching in slow, fading spasms, and then they went completely still. Thud. The lifeless body dropped to the floor, slumping sideways in a heap of crumpled robes and lab gear, as Leo rose unsteadily, his legs wobbling beneath him as he staggered toward the wall-mounted control console. His fingers shook violently as he reached for the interface, pressing at random until the dusty screens flickered back to life. A row of grainy visuals lit up in sequence covering everything from the facility corridors, security doors, various observation labs, to the exact area his family was currently fighting in, as Leo breathed a sigh of relief when he saw them. The camera feed showed Amanda, Luke, Alia, Elena and Jacob being escorted through the eastern hallway. 2 guards flanked them with rifles drawn, while the second scientist led the way, talking animatedly as if preparing for a grand performance. Leo's eyes narrowed. He didn't need to hear the audio to know what was going on. They were being brought in for testing. Without wasting a moment, Leo crouched beside the dead scientist and began stripping him of his robe, gloves, and mask. The coat was damp and smelled of blood and chemicals, but Leo pulled it on anyway. Before grabbing the glasses and face covering as he finished the disguise. At the same time, he activated Mirror World. A perfect illusion of himself materialized in front of the operating table, as Leo laid the clone down exactly where he had been and secured the restraints again, replicating the earlier position to the last detail. From a distance, everything looked untouched and soon footsteps echoed in the hall right outside the lab. Hurriedly, Leo stepped near a stack of instruments, hunched his shoulders, and lowered his head, mimicking the posture of a scientist running tests. As the doors slid open with a ** hiss, **, Leo. Amanda's voice cracked as she rushed forward, only to be struck across the face by the butt of a rifle. She collapsed to her knees with a grunt of pain. "Shut up, bitch," one of the guards muttered. "That's enough," the second scientist said, raising a hand. "I'll take them from here." The guards nodded and turned to leave, the heavy door sealing behind them. "I did it, Master," the scientist said with a proud smile, turning toward Leo. "I saved them. Step. Step." The second scientist stepped closer, lowering his head respectfully. However, right as he came within striking distance, Leo raised his hand and drove a scalpel straight through his throat. Kill strike. The man staggered back, gurgling in confusion, clutching at his neck as blood spilled across his robes. Leo caught him before he hit the ground, whispering coldly, "Shouldn't have gone after my family," before turning to face his family, who were all smiles and joy to see him. "Leo, my baby," his mother said first, running quickly to give him a hug, however, was unable to because of her restraints. "Mother, you're bleeding," Leo replied in response, looking shocked as he hugged her before quickly looking for antiseptic to clean her wound, as he hurriedly began to treat her. "Leo, Leo, Leo, Leo," the rest of his family members said, one after another, as Leo unshackled them after treating his mother and gave them all except their father a tight hug. "Thank you so much for coming to save me. I'm sorry to put you all under so much trouble," Leo apologized heartily, as his brother gave him a tight smack on his head. "Don't thank us, find a way for us to get out of here," Luke said, as Leo's eyes sharpened once again. "The lady who saved me, she did teach me a method to find her if I ever got separated. I guess I could give her a call," Leo said, as he began searching for an external communication console within the lab's various control panels. It took him a while, but eventually he did find it and sent out an SOS with his current location attached. However, what he did not know was that the channel he sent the SOS out to was not limited to Mew Fan only, but rather open to the whole evil cult network, with every evil cult operative within the same solar system getting the alert. As of all the mistakes he made, somehow this one just happened to be the worst of them all. Meanwhile, Mew Fan observed the emotions playing out across Leo's face with careful attention, her eyes scanning every twitch, every flicker in his expression, as though reading a battlefield for signs of a turning tide. He looked shocked. He looked angry. He looked moved. But he didn't look betrayed. Not yet. That part hadn't returned to him. Not the memory of the final night. Not the memory of the deal she made. Gulp. She gulped hard, as the fear of his memories returning scared her. Her hand trembled faintly as she pressed more mana into the memory retrieval circuit, praying as she waited for his anger to show. "I only did what I had to. For the cult. For the mission. For him." Her gaze softened, but the weight in her chest only grew heavier. "I just hope, when the truth finally resurfaces, you'll understand why I chose the path I did. I hope you'll remember the reasons, not just the pain. Because if you don't, if you see only betrayal in my actions, then everything that comes next will be so much harder for both of us." Her fingers tightened around the mana conduit. And silently, she prayed that the boy she protected over the past year, the young dragon she molded, would still see her as an ally when the final veil fell. Welcome to Fanfic Audiobook, your go-to place for immersive audiobooks. If you enjoy the content, don't forget to like the video and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories. And please support the author by link in description. Leo's Memories, the underground testing lab. Just a few minutes after Leo sent out a distress signal. Kaboom! A violent explosion rattled the underground laboratory, as grains of sand fell from the ceiling onto the floor. Emergency alarm sirens began to blare, and as Leo looked into the surveillance footage, he could see that some unknown organization seemed to be infiltrating the base through the front gate, as the local security teams scrambled to respond. Then, suddenly the lab doors unlocked with a hiss, probably in response to the emergency override protocol, as two guards burst in with weapons drawn, expecting to find panicked scientists and sedated test subjects inside. only to be shocked when they found a free-standing Leo instead, moving towards them with a scalpel in hand. "Get down!" Luke shouted, diving at the first guard before he could even take proper aim, while Alia flanked the second and slammed a metal tray into his helmet. Leo arrived last, slashing with the stolen scalpel, as blood of the two men sprayed across the floor. Splat! The fight was quick and brutal. The guards were trained, but unprepared for a coordinated ambush from desperate survivors. And once they dropped, Leo retrieved one of the rifles, swaying slightly as his vision pulsed, before tossing it to his father, who he knew could use it well. "We move now," Luke said, already leading the way out, as Amanda and Elena helped support Leo from both sides until he regained his footing. Together, they weaved through the chaos, slipping past distracted patrols and half-destroyed corridors, but it wasn't without resistance. In one hallway, they had to fight a mutated test subject that had escaped containment. And in another, they clashed with reinforcements trying to seal off the tunnels, as throughout, Leo fought till the limit of his capabilities, but unfortunately for him, his strength was fading fast. He wasn't in an optimal condition to fight after his blood transfusion, and desperately needed proper rest, however chose to fight on the vanguard nonetheless. He felt dizzy and disoriented, with his current strength and stamina being extremely limited compared to his usual energetic self, which made him sloppier than usual in combat. Going through just 2 short battles, he received a deep cut across his shoulder, another across his lower leg, and the worst at the side of his neck, where a curved blade managed to tear off a chunk of flesh. As in the end, his knees buckled just as the group approached a blast-sealed exit that looked like a dead end. The last thing he remembered seeing before his vision gave out was the wall beside them being blown apart, as a red-haired figure stepped through the smoke, caught him before he hit the ground, and slung him over her shoulder with a firm grip. "Follow me if you want to live," Mu Fan said, her eyes scanning the area sharply, as she led the entire family out in one swift, decisive motion. And then everything went dark. Dash 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 dash. The next time Leo woke up, he found himself lying on a soft bed, sunlight pouring down across his face through a tall window lined with white curtains. As he squinted, the haze in his vision faded just enough for him to make out a vast green field stretching beyond the glass, its surface dotted with blooming wildflowers that swayed gently in the breeze. But his attention quickly returned to the room, where he spotted Fan seated quietly beside him. "Where am I? How long was I out?" he asked, his voice dry and groggy. "You're safe, and you've been unconscious for over 3 days, Fan replied with a soft sigh, watching as Leo's eyes widened in disbelief. 3 days? My family must be losing their minds. Can you let them know I'm awake?" he asked, already beginning to sit up. But Fan shook her head. "They're not here anymore, Leo. Your actions at the lab turned you all into fugitives. For their safety, we had to send them away." Leo's entire body tensed as he forced himself upright, his gaze sharp as a dagger as he glared at her. "Sent them where? Who are you really, and what did you do to my family?" His killing intent flared instinctively, but it evaporated almost instantly as Fan's eyes narrowed, her presence alone enough to freeze him in place. His breath caught in his throat, and for the first time in a long while, he felt genuine fear. Not from pain, not from injury, but from the invisible pressure she exuded, one that even actual dragons in VR game Terra Nova Online couldn't replicate. "Don't test me, boy," Fan said, her voice low and laced with restraint. "I've been patient with you. But you're still too naive." She rose slowly, brushing the side of his bed with her robes as she spoke. "I suspected from the start that you weren't ordinary. That there was something divine in your bloodline. The way you played the game, the forbidden skill you awakened that no player was ever meant to touch, it confirmed it for me. That's why I stepped in to save you. That's why I risked everything." She paused, her tone turning colder. "But then you had to throw it all away. You ignored my plan. You returned to the Ark ship like a fool and got caught. Because of that, not only did you destroy your own future, but you delivered your entire family, every last one of them carrying the blood of the timeless assassin, into the hands of a cult hungry for their next savior to appear. Leo's fists clenched, but she wasn't finished. Your actions sealed your brother and father's fates. As whatever it is in your blood that makes you special, also runs through them, and the elder I report to has decided to prepare all three of you for the post of the dragon, separately. She took a step back and folded her arms. Your mother, your girlfriend, and your sister-in-law, they're safe. The cult has no interest in them. They're being protected and treated with dignity. But your brother, he wasn't so lucky. The elder has arranged for him to be hunted every day by trained assassins, without him knowing it's a simulation. He will live his life as a beggar, a drifter, scraping by, always running, always hiding. They'll chase him, break him, and watch to see if he rises. Until he grows strong enough to either kill them all or breaks beyond the point where he's useless. Fan said, as she exhaled deeply, her expression darkening. And your father, well, let's not talk about your father. You won't be able to handle it. Leo's chest tightened as he listened to Fan speak, rage beginning to swell inside him like a storm. What do you mean I can't handle it? What do you mean they're torturing my brother? Free them. Tell me where they are. I'll kill every last one of you if I have to. But before he could move, she was already there, faster than his eyes could perceive, as her hand clamped over his mouth and forced him back down. Listen to me, you arrogant brat, she said, eyes boring into his. You want to save them. Then stop yelling. Stop threatening. And prove your worth. Her grip loosened just enough for him to breathe. If you want the cult to lose interest in your family, then outshine them. Become the next dragon. Become the one they want. Her voice softened, just barely. And if you succeed, I promise you this, your family will walk free. Leo clenched his fists beneath the covers, his jaw tightening as Fan's words echoed inside his skull. He hated it. Hated being forced into decisions he never wanted to make, pushed into corners he never walked into willingly. Every part of him wanted to scream, to reject the twisted logic she was feeding him, but deep down, he knew there was no way out. The cult had his family, and Leo wasn't strong enough to save them on his own yet. They had him by the balls, and he had no choice but to cooperate. You may not know anything about the prophecy. You may not understand the title of the dragon, Fan said, her voice calm but firm, but fate has already begun weaving itself around you. Leo looked away, his heart thudding with silent rage, but Fan continued before he could speak. This cult you currently dislike, is fighting for its survival. We're not the villains you think we are. A great evil is rising, and if we don't act, it will consume everything. Your bloodline wasn't born to live quietly. It was born to stand at the heart of this storm. She stepped closer, her eyes locking onto his with unwavering intensity. You can try to look away. You can pretend that if you run far enough, live small enough, hide deep enough, the war that's coming won't reach you. But it will. Leo's breath caught in his throat as her next words cut deeper than any blade. You and your family carry the blood of the timeless assassin, and for that reason alone, the so-called righteous faction will never let you live in peace. They'll hunt you, relentlessly, across planets, across systems, across lifetimes if they have to. Fan warned, as Leo sat in silence, trying to process it all, but it felt like drowning. Like he was being forced to breathe underwater while the weight of destiny pressed down on his chest. You don't have to fight for the cult. You don't have to fight for me. But you do have to fight. Because if you don't, you'll lose everything, if not now then later. Fan said, as she folded her arms and took a step back, her voice softening just a little. As her words settled in, Leo felt his rage begin to waver. He didn't like any of this, not the situation, not the pressure, and certainly not the idea that fate or some destiny could dictate the course of his life. But from the weight behind Fan's voice, from the way her gaze never faltered, he could sense that this was bigger than him, perhaps far bigger than anything he had ever known. And so, swallowing his pride and setting aside his base instinct to rebel, he made the wiser choice for once. Sigh. Exhaling slowly, he looked her in the eye. Fine, he said. Tell me everything. What is the cult really? What is this dragon title you keep talking about? And what did you mean when you said a great war is coming? As nodding, Mu Fan did her best to explain to Leo the exact situation he found himself in. The supreme beings of this universe are called gods, Fan began, her voice calm but resonant, as if every word carried the weight of history. They are immortal, untouchable, and eternal, beyond the reach of time, death, or decay. No mortal blade can pierce them, no mortal spell can harm them, and no mortal can outlive them. She paused, letting the silence sit heavy before continuing. But this invincibility, it breeds arrogance. It turns divinity into tyranny. Her gaze drifted toward the window, as though seeing beyond it. 3,000 years ago, the universe was a different place. A darker one. Mortals on countless planets lived in fear, praying to gods they could neither understand nor disobey. A single mistake, a delayed offering, or even a defiant thought could result in entire civilizations being wiped out overnight. She turned to face Leo again, eyes steady. Any warrior who dared rise past the transcendent realm was viewed as a threat, and eliminated. Dreams were silenced before they could bloom, as back then, the idea of justice was just a pretty word with no teeth. But that's when our cult was born. The cult of ascension. Not as heretics, not as rebels, but as resistance. As the last hope of mortals. She leaned in slightly, her voice quieting. Our founder was no ordinary man. He was the first to unlock a method where mere mortals could unite and slay a god. And not just that, he ascended. He became divine himself, not by birthright, but by blood, sweat, and the will to protect. Leo felt his heart race. They called him the timeless assassin. And for 1,000 years, he brought terror to the divine. One by one, he hunted the tyrant gods and struck them down, restoring balance and kindness to a universe that had forgotten both. Fan's voice trembled, just slightly, as she said the next part. Under him, the cult of ascension rose to rule the stars. We became the governing body of the known universe, and under our rule, mortals thrived for a couple centuries, but unfortunately it didn't last. Her expression darkened. 2,000 years ago, came the great betrayal. The surviving gods joined forces in secret and ambushed our creator. They killed him first, and then they turned on the cult, driving us back to obscurity, as we fell from the stars into the shadows. And yet, in our darkest hour, we found hope. Leo blinked. Hope. Fan nodded. A prophecy. Left behind by the founder himself. It spoke of a descendant, someone born from his bloodline who would rise and finish what he started. Someone who would become the next timeless assassin and avenge his death. And that descendant, within the cult, is called Dragon. Her voice softened again, yet remained firm. Over the last 2,000 years, over 500 candidates have been chosen. All of them hunted. All of them killed. Because the so-called righteous alliance, the same forces of gods who banded together to betray us, fear what that prophecy means. Leo's hands clenched beneath the sheets. And that's why, Fan continued, whether you want to or not, they will come for you. If not now, then later. If not you, then your son. Or your grandson, for this war is not something you can outrun, not with the blood of the timeless assassin flowing through your veins. She let that sink in before delivering the final truth. At any given time, the cult only recognizes one dragon candidate. One legitimate heir to the timeless assassin's legacy, so if you become that heir, the cult will then stop grooming your father and brother for the throne, and release them from the path. Her voice dipped, turning almost gentle now. Becoming the dragon is cruel. It's a path of isolation, war, and pain. But tell me, Leo, if someone must bear it, who would you rather it be? You, or your family? Fan asked, her voice fading into silence, as Leo closed his eyes, because the weight of her words had already settled inside him, like a burden he could neither refuse nor escape. So what you're telling me, Leo said slowly, his voice flat yet simmering with disbelief, is that just by existing, just because of my bloodline, I'm destined to be hunted across the stars by some self-proclaimed righteous faction, whether I've wronged them or not? He asked, as Fan gave him a quiet nod. The very fact that your blood exists is a threat to their universal order. They won't rest until every last trace of the timeless assassin's lineage is erased. Which is why you don't get to choose peace, which is exactly why the only viable choice you have now is to become the next dragon, as it's the only way to free your family from this nightmare. Fan replied. As for a while Leo said nothing. For a while, he did nothing but look at his clenched fists, as if making up his mind. But then eventually, he did look up, and this time he had steel in his gaze. Fine, he said, voice firm. If me and my family can't avoid the fate of war, then there's no point in me thinking that I could have just sat this one out somehow. Give me the fastest and hardest route to becoming the next dragon, but give me a sure-shot way. If someone must carry this burden, then it's best it's me, rather than Luke or that washed old man. So tell me, what must I do to become this dragon that you want me to be? Leo asked, as a faint spark of appreciation flickered in Fan's eyes. The hardest path, she asked, arching a brow. Are you sure that's what you want? There's nothing in this universe that I, the boss, can't achieve, Leo replied coldly. If becoming the dragon is the only way to protect my family, then so be it. He leaned forward, eyes burning with resolve. Just tell me what I need to do next, he demanded, as Fan exhaled a long, weary breath before speaking again. All right then, listen carefully, because your mission won't be easy. You'll have to erase your memories, suppress your identity, and infiltrate the very heart of the enemy. You'll train amongst the righteous faction's elite, hide in plain sight, and pass every psychological background test they throw at you. Leo's brow twitched, but he didn't interrupt. You'll live as a common student at Rodova Military Academy, she continued. You won't remember your past, your family, or even who you are, not until the time is right. She stepped closer, her voice lowering. And if you survive it all, if you somehow make it through the ranks undetected, your final task will be to infiltrate the Black Serpent's Guild and retrieve a lost scroll placed securely within their armory. It's a scroll that's extremely important to the cult and must be retrieved at any cost necessary, and if you manage to do all that, no one in the cult will ever question your right to be the dragon, and I can guarantee you will be crowned the successor. Fan said, as she studied him for a long moment. So, Leo Skyshard, I ask you this one final time. Are you truly prepared for this? To give up everything you are, just for a chance to save your family from a life of horrors? As Leo's answer came without hesitation. Yes, he said, voice steady as stone. Yes, I am. Present moment, Leo's new accommodation room, Twin Fang Planet. Once the memory recall was complete, Leo slowly opened his eyes, the ceiling above him appearing a blur at first, as his senses realigned, except this time, he remembered everything. The silence in the room felt heavier than before, as he pushed himself up ever so slightly and saw Mu Fan standing at the foot of his bed, watching him carefully, almost nervously. Her hands were behind her back, her posture straight, yet there was a flicker of unease in her eyes, as though she wasn't sure if he'd thank her or try to kill her. Leo said nothing at first. He simply stared at her, his gaze blank, yet simmering just beneath the surface, as the truth of everything he had learned sank deep into his bones. He had been played, used by the cult like a piece on a chessboard, as he was handed nothing but half-truths by Mu Fan, who forced him into a war he never asked to be part of. The worst part, he was manipulated by the very side that claimed to be saving him, as at this point his only reason to stick with the cult was because they were the only faction in the universe that did not want him dead, while everyone else was out for his blood. So, Mu Fan finally said, her voice cautious, how do you feel? Leo let out a dry, mirthless chuckle, but his eyes never left hers. I feel enlightened, he replied coolly, I finally understand the rules of the game. And though he didn't raise his voice, and didn't accuse her directly, the weight of his silence said more than any words ever could. Mu Fan gulped nervously, as Leo's reaction confirmed her worst fears. He has stopped trusting me and the cult, she assessed, as she let out a dry mirthless laugh of her own. She had known long ago that the methods the Elder suggested to manipulate Leo into taking part in this game were wrong. However, such was the desperation of the cult, that neither could they be forthright with Leo, nor could they afford to lose him. He was the last dice they had to roll to turn the tide of war that had seen them shrink in influence over the past 1,000 years. As unless the next dragon could rally the strength of the entire cult of ascension behind him. Mu Fan knew that they might not survive yet another 100 years and still remain a credible threat to the current universal order. Leo took a moment to steady his breath, forcing himself to calm down. Now that his memories had returned, a quiet confidence settled over him, because he finally remembered that this wasn't the first time that the odds had been stacked against him. It was just another battle in a long line of impossible battles, and like always, he intended to survive it. Tell me more about this scroll I'm supposed to retrieve, Fan. I assume it's the final hurdle I need to clear before the cult releases my family and picks me as their dragon, or was that promise a lie as well? Leo asked sarcastically, as Fan felt her stomach twist at the coldness in his voice. Pressing her lips into a thin line, she took a moment to steady herself, choosing to ignore the barb as she replied with quiet sincerity. The scroll once belonged to the previous dragon, Noah. He lost it during his final battle with Dupravel, and it's been in the possession of the Black Serpents ever since. According to our intelligence, the scroll is locked inside their loot vault, a place that's nearly impossible to breach from the outside. To retrieve the scroll, you will need to earn their trust by completing a mission that grants you unimpeded access to the vault, and only then can you attempt the heist. Fan explained, as Leo gave a small nod of understanding. Very well, I suppose I'll dance for you again, play my part, and somehow find a way inside that vault. However, I expect that you'll train me on how to carry out a heist when the time comes. The boss is not a petty thief and doesn't have experience carrying out robberies, Leo said coldly, as Fan's frown deepened. With his memories back, Leo's old arrogant persona was also coming back to light, as she had not heard him refer to himself as the boss in a while now. Of course, when the time comes, the cult will provide you with all the help you need to carry out a heist, she answered, though Leo did not even do her the courtesy of looking into her eyes. Then leave. Your work here is done, and I have future missions to plan for, he muttered, turning away completely as Fan watched him in silence for a moment longer. I know I should have been honest with you from the beginning, she said softly, her voice tinged with guilt. But I was under strict orders not to reveal the truth until now. Still, if it means anything, I have no intention of keeping things from you again. And if you do ever find it in yourself to trust me, I promise I won't break it. With those words, she turned and left the room, hoping, perhaps foolishly, that something in her honesty would reach Leo's heart. To be fair, Leo wasn't all that mad at Mu Fan to begin with. It wasn't her fault that she had been forced to act a certain way under orders, and he even acknowledged the fact that she had probably done her job as his overseer in the best way she knew how, while staying within the confines set by her superiors at the cult. Even so, the fact that she remained a loyal soldier of the cult unsettled him, as he did not wish to place his trust in people bound by rigid hierarchies and doctrine, because loyalty to an organization could always eclipse loyalty to him the moment it became inconvenient. And so, Leo quietly resolved to begin distancing himself from Fan, emotionally, strategically, and to treat every cult member with measured suspicion going forward. As although he was indeed allied with the cult, he always needed to remember that it was an alliance of convenience and necessity, and not one born out of trust or choice. No point crying over spilled milk, it's best I move on and focus on how to get into that vault as soon as I can, Leo said to himself, as a few minutes after Mu Fan was gone, he headed out as well, with his destination being the missions hall. Black Serpents Guild Missions Hall, Inner District, Twin Fang Planet. Leo was surprised to see over 100 people within the missions hall when he entered it, as although the missions hall was open 24/7, he did not expect to run into 1,000 people inside it as late as 11 p.m. Assassins of all tiers and races who had somehow managed to become a part of the Serpents stared at the hundreds of mission postings stuck to the mission's wall, as they contemplated whether any was worth undertaking. Since the Black Serpents only mandated that people complete 2 missions during any calendar year, most left without showing interest in any mission when they found nothing suitable, as the Black Serpents remained one of the very few guilds in the universe that frequently received more jobs than what they could complete. The missions posted on the wall were color-coded into 6 categories: white, green, yellow, red, black, and gold. Each hue corresponded to a tier of difficulty and reward, and every assassin in the hall understood exactly what each one represented. White missions were at the very bottom. These were handed out to fresh recruits or to those desperate to meet their yearly quota. The targets in these contracts were often petty shopkeepers, minor business rivals, or unguarded political voices. The payout was minimal, but the danger was nearly non-existent, making them the go-to choice for those seeking to avoid unnecessary risks. Next came the green missions, which made up the majority of the board. These were considered the bread and butter of the Black Serpents, and typically involved targets like prominent martial artists or politicians surrounded by loyal guards. Only Grandmaster tier assassins and above could accept them, as the margin for error was thin and a misstep could lead to serious complications. The third tier was marked yellow, and these missions carried a very real threat of death. Targets here were dangerous individuals, renowned killers, high-ranking cultists, rogue warlords, or beings enhanced by experimental technologies. Only Transcendents and a select few Grandmasters with perfect track records were cleared to take them, and the rewards ranged from 1 to tens of millions of MP, but so did the number of casualties, which made even seasoned assassins hesitate before taking one. Above yellow came red, and red missions were simply cataclysmic. These involved assassinations of royal bloodlines, orchestrating military coups, or eliminating entire dynasties in a single sweep. Completing such a mission often meant going dark for years, as the fallout from such assignments was galaxy-wide and unavoidable. These were the highest-paying jobs short of suicide, and only a select few assassins within the guild were permitted to attempt them. And finally, at the apex, were the black missions. In theory, anyone could take them, however, in reality, only one man could ever hope to complete them, with that man being the Guildmaster Dupravel Nuna himself. These missions were widely regarded as impossible. No successful attempts had ever been recorded. And they were pinned to the wall like curses, their mere presence serving as a reminder of what true madness looked like. However, aside from these 5 standard categories, there was a rare and unpredictable 6th, gold. Gold missions were outliers. Their difficulty fluctuated, sometimes as manageable as green, other times deadlier than black. But the one constant was the reward, which was always astronomical for gold missions. These missions were also nicknamed as golden opportunities within the guild, as they were often unique tasks tied to specific time-sensitive events or strange cosmic alignments, and these missions often attracted dreamers and lunatics alike. Once Leo read the color chart and its meaning, his gaze moved from one section of the board to the next, color by color, until his eyes landed at the far left corner. There, behind a layer of reinforced mana shielding, 2 missions gleamed faintly under soft illumination, one gold, one black. Golden Mission, Temporal Zone Expedition. Objective: enter and retrieve a particular item from a time-stilled world located in the Kale Vortex region. Notes: the world's time has been frozen due to an ancient anomaly. All previous teams have failed to return. No communications. No traces. Threat level: unknown, presumed lethal. Reward: 6.5 billion megapixels or one unrestricted item of choosing from the Black Serpent's vault. Black Mission, terminate evil god Soren. Objective: locate and assassinate Soren, supreme leader of the evil cult. Notes: divine tier entity. Possesses reality-altering abilities. All prior assassination attempts have failed. Threat level: maximum. Reward: 551 billion megapixels or any 10 items of choice from the Black Serpent's vault. Leo stared at the various missions and their rewards posted on the missions board. However, after scanning everything, he realized that there were only 2 missions currently posted up there that granted unrestricted access to the Black Serpent's treasury. One was the Golden Opportunity mission into a time-stilled world, and the other was the Black Tier mission to assassinate Soren, the supreme leader of the evil cult. And since assassinating the evil cult god was out of the question for him, the Gold mission remained as his only viable choice to gain the unrestricted access he needed to carry out the scroll heist. What even is a time-stilled world? Why have I never heard of it during my time in Rodova? Leo wondered, as he frowned slightly. The mission sheet provided no information on what exactly the mission world was, nor did it provide information on the risks associated with going to such a world. If I am to accept this mission, I need to first gather more information on it and assess whether I am capable of doing it or not, Leo thought, as he scanned the hall for someone who seemed talkative and approachable, with whom he could discuss this mission. And thankfully, he soon spotted a familiar face in Mr. Raiden. The older assassin was standing near the board's edge, speaking animatedly to a sharp-eyed man with dark shoulder-length hair and a tablet tucked under one arm as without hesitation, Leo made his way over. Well, if it isn't Leo Skyshard," Raiden said warmly as he spotted Leo's approach, as he slapped him happily on the shoulder. "I was just talking about you to Cypher here," Raiden continued, as the man beside him turned, his gaze narrowing as recognition flickered across his face. "Wait, you're Leo Skyshard, right? From the Interstellar Circuits?" he asked, as Leo gave a brief nod. "Thought so. You were insane in the finals. I'm Cypher," he added, extending a hand. "Raiden's unfortunate assassin partner." Leo accepted the handshake, still calm and composed. "Pleasure." "So," Raiden said, folding his arms with a smirk, "what brings you to the mission board at this hour? Don't tell me you're already hungry for your first contract." Leo tilted his head toward the gold-plated mission at the far end. "That one caught my eye." Raiden blinked, then let out a loud laugh. "You're kidding. That's exactly the mission I was referring to this afternoon. Looks like we're on the same wavelength already." Leo didn't smile. Raiden continued. "That mission is as dangerous as they come, but the payout? Worth it. If a party of 6 manages to complete it, each member could retire 7 generations deep. That 6.5 billion megapixels reward is too sweet to pass on without trying." He leaned in, dropping his voice slightly. "But so far, over 100 teams have tried. No one's returned." Leo's brow tightened. "What's it about and why is it so dangerous?" "We don't know," Cypher said. "But I've been collecting materials, old notes, theories, journals on time-stilled anomalies. I'm confident there's a strategy to survive them, and I'm working on one now with Raiden." Raiden nodded toward him. "I'm putting together a party that can explore the time-stilled world with myself and Cypher. I have already convinced 2 members and I'm looking for 2 to 3 more. You're a great fighter, kid. We could use someone like you if you're interested, and it will always be safer to go in as a team versus individually. If it works out, we will be rich, but if not, we are the type that prioritize our life over rewards, so we will bail out before it becomes too dangerous," he said, as Leo gave a slow nod in reply. "I'm interested. But I'll do my homework first, before committing," he said, before turning to Cypher. "You said you've been collecting notes. Mind telling me where I can start?" he asked, as Cypher smiled. "There's a restricted archive in the guild's library, section ZETA 9. Ask for the Chrono Lock Archives. That's where I found most of the useful theories." "I'll check it out," Leo replied, then glanced back at the golden placard one last time. He didn't have the full picture yet, but if this mission held even the possibility of getting him closer to the scroll in the vault, then it was worth exploring. Even if it meant taking calculated risks. Black Serpent's Guild Library, Section Zeta 9, the Chrono Lock Archives. Step. Leo's footsteps echoed lightly through the corridor as he made his way down the torch-lit passage toward the inner chambers of the Black Serpent's Guild Library. The architecture here felt older, more carved than constructed, vaulted ceilings supported by rough-hewn stone arches, each lined with narrow crystal tubes that pulsed faintly with mana, casting a dim, flickering light. Compared to the Rodova Military Academy's library, this one felt smaller and less curated. Rodova's archive had been an intellectual fortress, a sprawling monument to knowledge with entire wings dedicated to every known science, warrior path, and political treatise across the star systems. But this was different. It was colder, quieter, less polished, but also more focused. Here, the shelves weren't meant for scholars or students, they were created for killers. Dozens of tomes and handwritten scrolls sat sealed behind protective casings, many of them filled with forbidden studies, classified reports, and blacklisted military experiments that had long been purged from public record. This library was not a place that one browsed for research or to satiate curiosity, but rather a place one visited to prepare for assassination. Zeta 7. Zeta -8. Zeta -9. As Leo reached the far corner of the library, he finally saw a dull brass plate hung over a blackwood arch labeled Zeta 9. As this was the section nicknamed the Chronolock Archives, containing a list of skills, events and worlds linked with abnormalities in time. Less than 100 books sat in there, as most of the section was filled with assassin-written hand notes on how to take down targets possessing peculiar time abilities. However, there were still a few useful things to be found. On the very first shelf was a large book with a worn cover titled, Tracking and Taking Down Targets in a Time-Stilled World, which piqued Leo's curiosity, as he selected the book and proceeded to sit on the central table to begin his research. Thud! The book made a slight sound as Leo opened it, and the very first page he found was blank, except for a single sentence scrawled in red ink. If given a choice between going into a time-stilled world or not, don't go. Leo's eyes narrowed, but he turned the page without flinching. Whoever wrote this book clearly did not want others to follow suit for him to leave such a warning. However, Leo did not let it deter him. He wasn't here to be coddled or frightened off by ominous scribbles. He was here for answers. And if the truth about time-stilled worlds was buried in these pages, no matter how grim or unsettling, it was knowledge he intended to uncover. Slowly, he flipped to the next page, his gaze sharpening as the first inked page came into view, as he began reading with a clear mind. Black Serpent's Guild Library, Section Zeta 9, the Chronolock Archives. Swap. Leo flipped the page. The ominous warning on the first page faded behind him as he turned to the next sheet, only to find the beginning of a memoir-style log. The handwriting was elegant yet firm, the ink slightly smudged by time, as a bold heading was etched across the top of the page. Field Log, penned by Captain Elric Vaughn. Beneath it, a carefully written subtitle. Day 0, Mission Brief. Our squad has been deployed under Classified Directive 47XJ. Our objective is to track and eliminate Subject D, a wanted war criminal who fled into a time-stilled world via an unstable vortex tear in the Kale Vortex region. Entry has been authorized for 7 personnel, 5 assassins from the cult under my command and 1 high-sensitivity empath-class prisoner, who has been promised conditional freedom in exchange for guiding us to the fugitive. The target is presumed armed, mutated, and possibly insane. We enter at 0500 hours, and expect to retrieve the body within 10 days of entering, or roughly within 3 hours of time passage in reality. Day 1. The moment we cross the portal threshold, I can feel the subtle change in pressure, like stepping into a sealed dome at high altitude, though there is no discomfort, only difference. The world on the other side is caught in an eternal dusk, bathed in a strange glow between sunset and true night. There is no true night here, nor there is day, as the darkest I've seen the environment get is about as dark as we experience just after sunset, while the lightest is just before sunset, as the modulation is very low. There is no wind, not even the gentlest rustle of a breeze. The air here remains still and warm, unnaturally consistent, as if the entire world has no weather changes at all. That being said, within the bounds of this pocket world, time flows normally for us, but all external communication ceases the moment we enter. No matter what method is used, it's impossible to contact the outside world once inside, which makes it hard to call for help or evacuation in case something goes wrong. Spells cast here seem to resonate with unnatural clarity. On average, the squad reports an estimated 15 to 20% increase in spell output and clarity of control. As casting spells in this world makes us feel stronger, and deceptively so. The ground here is firm, gravity matches standard planetary regulation, and nothing at first glance feels hostile. But that illusion of calm is what worries me most. Day 2. The squad is in good spirits. Our supply of purified mana stones is holding up. No one's drawing from the world's ambient mana yet, save for the prisoner, who lacks any personal reserves. He has been quietly tapping into the local environment to maintain his abilities, though I have begun to observe something unusual. He appears strained. His eyes are bloodshot despite resting the same hours as the rest of us. His skin has grown clammy, his movements slightly delayed, as if his body is waging a silent battle against something we cannot see. He insists he feels fine, but I know the signs of exhaustion when I see them, and this looks like something more than just fatigue. It is as though his mind is slipping, fraying slowly with each breath of the air he draws and each trickle of mana he absorbs. Day 7. Tension has set in. The entire squad now admits a lingering unease. The shadows seem longer than they should be. There are no stars, no moon, no celestial markers in the sky, and yet we always feel watched. Our prisoner has begun to act increasingly erratic, scratching at his arms, mumbling nonsense in languages I'm certain he never knew. He laughs at odd times, sobs when eating, and stares too long into empty spaces. The squad wants me to sedate him, but he is still our only link to the target. Still, I am noting a worrying trend. The longer one relies on this world's mana, the more unhinged their behavior becomes. The effects are not sudden but rather a slow, corrosive slide into delirium. Even now, I dread what might come next. Day 14. We have put him down. It brings me no pleasure to write this, but the prisoner had to be neutralized. He attacked team member Darren during the night shift, lunging without a weapon but with a manic ferocity that ignored all logic. Even after Darren severed his right arm at the elbow, he didn't scream, he laughed. He fought like an animal, biting and clawing, his eyes wide with bliss as if possessed by something unspeakable. After securing the camp, we disposed of the body far from our main perimeter. No one spoke during the burial. We are all shaken. Day 17. We have started to track the target on our own, and progress has stalled. However, we have discovered something more worrying. The fauna and beasts found in this world do not behave in accordance with nature we find throughout the rest of the normal universe. Predators ignore prey if the prey appears weak, but anything showing strength, confidence, or power draws their attention. It is as though this realm punishes ambition. The local plant life siphons mana slowly, draining it during sleep, as if the soil itself resents intruders. And although the water here appears fresh and clean, those who taste it fall violently ill within hours. We now treat even clear lakes as traps. Day 20. We finally find him. The fugitive, Subject D, is located in a sunken grove littered with bones and echoing whispers that don't match any voice in our group. He looks unrecognizable. Emaciated, crawling on all fours, eyes pitch black with glowing cracks tracing his veins like burning rivers beneath the skin. He speaks, but it's as if something else is speaking through him. He claims he's been here for over a year, though the distortion of time makes that impossible to confirm. Whatever humanity was left in him is gone. His combat ability is terrifying. He uses techniques we've never seen before, fighting like a beast but with strategy, timing, and malice. We subdue him eventually, though it costs us 2 men. Day 22. Our mana stones have begun to turn. Even sealed in spatial rings are carried close to our bodies, they are now unusable. Their energy has soured, humming with a frequency that burns rather than heals. It appears that 22 days is the threshold, after which, any pure mana supply becomes corrupted simply by being in this world. Without proper detoxification techniques, drawing from them now is suicide. Day 25. The squad is no longer a squad. Arguments erupt over nothing. Accusations of sabotage, betrayal, and madness fly like daggers, and I cannot calm them. They are not just paranoid, they are unraveling. I hear footsteps in the night when no one is moving, see glimmers in mirrors that don't belong to us. The world itself is whispering now, testing our sanity. And so, on this day, I record that I am the last. Day 30. I emerge. Only 8 hours have passed in the real world. 8 hours. And yet, I feel the weight of 8 years. The head of Subject D rests in my pack, but it brings me no comfort. I return home not as a hero, but as a husk. I can no longer hear silence without expecting screams. 3 years later. If you are reading this and considering taking on a mission in a time-stilled world, I beg you, turn back. If you have the luxury of choosing not to enter a time-stilled world, don't. But if you must, then let my experience guide your survival. 1. Carry 10 times the food, water, and medicine you think you need. 2. Trust no plant, no beast, no breeze. 3. Travel only with equal squad members. Never with superiors or stronger tiered warriors, as they will draw stronger beast opponents. 4. Do not light fires in the world to cook or for light. 5. Do not believe anything that speaks to you in your own voice. 6. Never absorb local mana. 7. Treat 22 days as your hard limit with standard mana stones. 44 days with medium-grade stones and 88 days with high-grade stones, but never spend more than 100 days in that world. 8. Do not venture too deep inside the world, stay close to the exit, as the terrain inside shifts fast and your mind starts playing tricks on you the longer you stay within. After finishing the book, Leo didn't move for a while, as his eyes remained fixed on the final page of the memoir. The captain's handwriting here was noticeably different, no longer looking clean or composed, but rather erratic and uneven, as each stroke reflected the lingering damage to a mind that had never fully recovered, even after 3 years had passed. However, Leo did not let such petty things affect him, as his mind filtered past the hysteria, the horror, and the dramatic warnings and searched for only things that mattered. The key takeaway for him wasn't the madness, the deaths, or the creeping paranoia described in the memoir, but rather the fact that the captain had returned alive and successful from his mission. Even if broken, even if shaken, Captain Elric Vaughn had completed a 30-day expedition inside the time-stilled world and had made it back with the target's head in hand, proving that survival, though rare, was not impossible. And that, Leo realized, was the most valuable piece of information buried in the entire journal. He didn't care for dramatics. He didn't need tales of suffering to scare him straight. What he needed were probabilities, boundaries and thresholds of dangers found inside the world, and the memoir had given him exactly that. It provided him with a clear timeline, an outlined limit on mana stone corruption, a first-hand account of what to avoid, how fast the descent into madness occurred, and what signs to look out for. It wasn't much, but it was enough to show him that this mission, despite its dangers, could be done. And if the reward for success was the Black Serpent's full treasury access, then it was a risk worth taking. That being said, there were far too many things he still didn't understand. Why was circulating the world's mana so dangerous, even though it felt empowering at first? Why did absorbing ambient mana trigger such a slow but irreversible descent into insanity? Why did even the best mana stones turn corrupted, no matter how they were stored? And more importantly, how is it that 30 days inside had only equated to 8 hours in the real world? Leo frowned slightly as he looked back down at the sealed memoir, the final words of the captain etched like scars into the parchment. They had told him the what, but not the why. And if he was going to step into a world where logic twisted and time bent, then understanding the mechanics of such a world was not optional. Slide. Step. Leo rose from his seat without a word, returning to the same shelf he picked the first book from, as he now scanned the titles more carefully. After a moment, his fingers landed on a slimmer, far less formal-looking volume, its cover scrawled with an almost lazy confidence. I went inside a time-stilled world to meditate for 30 days. Here's what I found. The handwriting was rougher, the ink newer, and the cover lacked the severity of the last book, but Leo wasn't looking for emotion. He was looking for insight. If the first account had shown him the warning signs, then perhaps this one would give him the science. The patterns. The answers. Some more knowledge on what to expect and what were the dangers, as Leo sat down to read it at once. Author's note. My name is Varn Elric. I am a Master Tier assassin under the Black Serpents Guild, and this journal serves both as a record of my experience of meditating in a time-stilled world. In 2 days' time, a green-coded team mission is set to begin at the guild, and although I want in, as I am only a Master Tier warrior, I am not qualified to participate. The mission requires one to be a Grand Master or higher realm assassin to take part, and I am still one wall away from a breakthrough. So I've decided to make a gamble. With the approval of my senior, I have decided to enter a time-stilled world, planning to spend exactly 30 days within, equivalent to 8 hours in real time. I intend to use this pocket of temporal dilation to push myself through the barrier and attain Grandmaster status so that I can participate in the mission on time. Also, my senior has even promised a payment of 50,000 megapixels if I return alive with a detailed written log. And so, this is my record. Page 1. On entry and the nature of mana. The moment I arrive, I know I've made the right call, at least for now. The mana in this world is thick, far denser than what we breathe or cycle in the outside universe. Every breath feels charged. Every movement glides smoother. Meditating here is like bathing in a liquid current of raw energy. My thoughts align quicker, and the absorption rate of ambient mana has jumped nearly 30 to 40% above my previous record in standard environments. To use a crude analogy, it's like powering a fire lantern with a low-grade mana stone in the real world, versus lighting it with a high-grade core here. The difference is undeniable. I feel powerful. I feel clear. I feel like I can tear through the walls in my path. Page 2. The cost beneath the surface. But power comes with a cost. The mana here is strong, yes. But it is not clean. There's something stale about it, something that makes each cycle feel slightly heavier than the last. With every hour, I sense a stickiness clinging to my mana circuits, like residue that refuses to flush. Meditating here feels like injecting a stimulant. The surge is immediate, the progress visible, but there's damage lurking beneath. I feel like the elasticity of my mana pathways to expand and contract in response to varying loads is suffering. The more I meditate, the more I feel the rigidity setting in. The smooth inner lining of my circuits now feels rougher, grainier, like stone rubbed raw by sand. I'm pushing forward, but I know I'm paying a price. Page 3. Day 7 breaking point. It's been 7 days. And I don't know how much more I can take. When I close my eyes now, I hear voices, sometimes whispering, sometimes screaming. I try to focus, but the silence is no longer silent. It pulses. It stabs. It writhes. Meditation, once my refuge, now feels like a battlefield. I am close, so close to a breakthrough, but every time I enter trance, I see things I shouldn't. Feel things that gnaw at the edge of reason. This place doesn't want me to succeed. It wants me to break. Page 4. Breakthrough and the price of power. I did it. I broke through. But it nearly killed me. Not 10 minutes after I crossed the wall into Grandmaster tier, I was attacked by 3 beasts that seemed to materialize from nowhere. It's as if this world itself marks you the moment you evolve. The fight left me bloodied and bruised. I won, but I lost something, too. My mana circuits, they're not the same. Their flexibility is gone. The rigidity is now permanent. When I attempt to cycle mana at the new tier's full capacity, my walls swell and resist, and sharp pain rips through my body. If I push harder, they will rupture. I know it. So yes, I am stronger. But I am also broken. My potential has been capped. My future compromised. Conclusion. Let this record be my final warning. Do not attempt to meditate inside a time-stilled world unless you are prepared to sacrifice your long-term future for short-term gain. Yes, you may rise in power. Yes, you may return a tier higher. But the price is not just pain. It is permanent disability. After finishing the second book, Leo leaned back slightly in his chair, his gaze still fixed on the final page that now lay open before him. Unlike the haunting memoir of Captain Vaughn, this one did not end in madness or massacre, but it still painted a bleak picture. Varn Elric had survived. That was the first thing Leo acknowledged, the most important takeaway of all. The man had gone in, broken through, fought beasts, suffered injuries, and returned with his mind and journal intact. His potential was permanently capped, yes, but even then, he had endured. And that, Leo reasoned, was something to be admired. As he reflected deeper, Leo's thoughts lingered on the irreversible damage to Varn's mana circuits. The elasticity of his mana pathways, once capable of expanding and adapting to sudden fluctuations in flow, had become rigid and inflexible after meditating inside the world. Tainted mana, though rich and empowering at first, had deposited layers of residue into the inner linings of his channels, corroding them silently over time. It seemed to Leo as though the mana of a time-stilled world acted like a silent killer that destroyed one's potential over time, as although he did not view this as a deal-breaker, he still did note this with grave seriousness. After all, Varn had been meditating in the tainted ambient mana for weeks. If Leo relied only on his own purified sources and circulated sparingly, then perhaps he could reap the rewards without suffering the fallout. But speculation wasn't enough. He needed more. The 2 books he had read so far had given him field perspectives, the human side of it all. But now, Leo sought technical precision. He wanted charts, records, and scientific data that could tell him more about a time-stilled world from an objective point of view. He wanted theories. He wanted warnings to look out for, and most of all, he wanted confirmation that the anomaly he was entering had been survived by others before him. Hence, without waiting further, he stood again and returned to the archives, his mind now focused solely on cross-referencing. He scanned the book titles placed on the shelf with cold efficiency, overlooking the emotional memoirs this time in favor of indexed reports, bounty records, and internal guild documents with informative titles. In the end, he selected titles such as Known Effects of Time-Stilled Worlds, How Time Distortion Works in Time-Stilled Worlds, What is Tainted Mana and How It Affects One's Body. As he picked up everything he found useful and began reading at once. For the next 14 hours, Leo did not leave the archive. No breaks, no distractions, no wasted motion. Just him, the rustle of paper, and the steady blink of his eyes as line after line of forbidden knowledge filled the gaps in his understanding. Some records were vague, others were scientific, a few were merely scribbled notes from scouts who had failed to complete their missions. But Leo read it all, every scrawl, diagram, and annotation the guild had preserved. When he finally looked up, the pieces had begun to fit together. Apparently, there were several time-stilled worlds scattered throughout the universe. They were all unstable fragments of space-time that existed in decelerated temporal pockets, sealed from the linear flow of the larger cosmos. They were relics of unknown origin, each functioning as a self-contained dimension where time passed at different rates, and the rules of mana interaction skewed wildly from world to world. Some were barely a moon's width long, acting as nothing more than small, manageable pockets used by criminals to hide from law enforcement. While others were death traps, psychological mazes filled with distorted mana, irregular gravity, mutated fauna, and time perception loops so intense that victims lost track of who or what they were. The one Leo was assigned to ranked in the top 3 most dangerous of all known anomalies. But even then, it wasn't considered unbeatable. According to the compiled logs, survivors, although very few recorded, had pointed to a few constants that increased one's chance of making it out alive. Firstly, sticking together during the initial phase was key. The world didn't seem to attack strength directly. Instead, it probed isolation. Solo wanderers, especially in the first few days, were often overwhelmed by hallucinations, mana poisoning, or mental corruption before their physical skills could even be put to use. However, the longer a person remained inside, the worse the group dynamic became. At a certain point, whether it was day 15, 20, or even earlier, the very presence of others began to fray the edges of trust. Teams that stayed together too long inevitably turned on one another, usually violently. Hence, the most successful strategy was a hybrid one. Stick together early on, when confusion and disorientation were highest. Then separate before the world had a chance to exploit proximity and sow seeds of madness. The timing of that separation, however, was entirely dependent on mental fortitude. Strong-willed individuals, those trained to resist illusion, pressure, and sensory distortion, could last longer, think clearer, and retain their sanity well beyond the baseline. But those who were unstable, those who doubted, hesitated, or harbored guilt, they broke fast, some as early as day 3. Leo processed it all in silence, his expression unreadable. There was fear in these texts. Dread. Stories of people who'd begged to be left behind, who'd carved runes into their own skin to ward off whispers, who'd snapped their own necks rather than continue deeper. But Leo read none of it with apprehension. He did not recoil from the descriptions of madness. He did not hesitate at the risk. Because none of it changed the reality of what needed to be done. He wasn't going into the time-stilled world because he wanted to. He was going in because it was the only way to get the vault access he needed. And no hallucination, no distortion, no horror masquerading as his own voice, was going to stand in the way of that. I suppose I can give this mission a shot by joining Mr. Raiden's party, Leo murmured to himself, his tone contemplative as he stepped out of the library. But before that, I'll need to evaluate the group's competence firsthand, as the last thing I need is to end up in a team that either has a transcendent tier warrior drawing unnecessary danger, or one that's simply too weak to survive in a world like that. With that, he made his way back to his apartment without delay. After spending over 16 hours devouring every scrap of information available on time-stilled worlds, Leo had come to a firm conclusion. Survival was possible within a time-stilled world with the right preparation, mental resilience, and a capable party. However, it couldn't be attempted on a whim or without proper planning. And so, he had decided that he would indeed take the risk after planning things through. And that he would venture into the time-stilled world, and take on the Golden Mission, hopefully, with Mr. Raiden's team, if they proved suitable, but if not, then he was prepared to form a party of his own and undertake the expedition regardless. Meanwhile, on an unknown Mu family stronghold planet, Mu Fan. After quitting life as an instructor at the Rodova Military Academy, Mu Fan returned to the Mu clan's fold, resuming her duties as branch family head and the infamous assassin, White Widow. However, in secret, she continued to be a member of the Cult of Ascension, with her very first act after coming back home being to make a call to the 12th elder of the evil cult. She knelt before an obsidian terminal shaped like an altar, behind which was a hidden communication mechanism that only she knew how to operate. And after coming home, it was the place she used to establish contact. As she kneeled in front of the terminal, her assassin cloak draping across the polished black floor as glowing glyphs shimmered beneath her feet when she passed her mana through it. Soon, the screen projected no face, only a dull crimson eye that flickered in and out of focus, as though watching her through layers of smoke. A deep voice filtered through the comm link next, as it sounded cold, slow, and devoid of haste. So, he did not show any outright signs of hostility after regaining his memories. The voice asked, "No, my lord," Mu Fan replied softly, bowing her head lower, her tone reverent. He seemed angry at first. Perhaps overwhelmed. But, showed no signs of hatred. No open rejection of what he saw. He did not reject the false memory we have planted in his mind, and his actions since then suggest that he has accepted it as the whole truth. I don't think he realizes that we altered his memories. There was silence for a beat. Then, the voice returned, low and smooth, like gravel wrapped in velvet. Emotion is the burden of lesser beings. Pain, betrayal, anger. These are expected, but irrelevant, and we can't let the future dragon be tangled in such a pointless mess. Mu Fan said nothing. She knew better than to interrupt. If the boy resents us for changing his truth, if he feels manipulated or violated, It is of no consequence in the grand scheme of things, the voice continued. Whether the cult has its claws in him, or whether he believes he has his claws in the cult, none of it matters. Mu Fan looked up slightly, her brows knitting faintly at the statement, but she still held her tongue. What matters, the voice said, growing firmer, is that he walks the path of the dragon. The correct path, as his denial will only delay the inevitable. There was a subtle click as something on the other end was switched, perhaps a monitor or a data scroll. We are not raising him to be a weapon like the Fourth Elder is doing to his dragon candidate. We are cultivating a savior. The next dragon of the cult can't be a mere soldier. He has to become the embodiment of ascension itself, as without a leader to rally around, the cult will soon lose its purpose and belief. Mu Fan inhaled slowly, then bowed once more. I feel confident that Leo will retrieve the scroll Noah dropped, she said quietly. He's finding his way to get into the Black Serpent's vault, and although it may take him a couple of years or more, I'm confident that eventually he will find a way, and for sure, she assured, as, good, came the response from the other end. I don't have as much political clout as the Fourth Elder, and if I'm to make him dragon, then he needs to have contributed significantly to the cult to the point where nobody can deny his contribution. Only after he's named dragon can the 12 elders pass down their secret techniques to him, transforming him from being just another assassin to the most dangerous man in the universe. But for that to happen, he needs to prove himself first, the elder said, as the transmission flickered once before cutting out. The red eye vanished, and Mu Fan remained kneeling to her spot long after the silence had returned. She was truly ashamed that she had given Leo an altered set of memories, whereby events that took place after he blacked out and found himself in an unknown infirmary ward never actually happened. However, with the 12th Elder deeming such manipulation necessary, she was forced to lie to Leo with a straight face. And at least for now, it seemed to be working. Meanwhile, within the Universal Government. The Universal Government's emergency war room sat buried beneath several layers of reinforced alloy and mana shielding, designed to withstand planet-cracking bombs and dimensional breaches alike. But tonight, the true pressure it faced wasn't from outside, but rather from within. Dozens of high-ranking officials, generals, intelligence chiefs, sector overseers sat around a black circular table, each with a holographic panel projecting live data streams, encrypted channels, and intergalactic threat assessments. The lights were dimmed, not out of preference, but necessity, as no one wanted to look another in the eye. The last 45 days had been the most humiliating for the Universal Army in recent history. We've waited long enough, barked General Hauser, slamming his fist into the table so hard his own panel flickered. The general populace is demanding blood. We have been silent for too long, locked in this endless hesitation while the media paints us as cowards. No one interrupted. His voice rose louder, veins bulging beneath his temple. 45 days since the Sky God Arena attack. 45 days of empty reports and hollow leads. All your so-called research and surveillance networks have led to nothing but dead ends. He paused, eyes scanning the room. We look like bloody fools. I'm not sitting on my hands any longer. Give me a name, a planet, a stronghold. I'll blow it off the universal map and make headlines tomorrow. Let the universal populace know we're not doing nothing. Enough, said Commander Ireland, her voice sharp enough to slice through metal. We're not launching a retaliatory strike to make headlines. Not unless we're striking the right target. Then where are your targets, Ireland? Hauser snarled. You run Intelligence Division 1. Find me a goddamn cult base. Ireland didn't flinch. We've traced 37 flagged nodes. All led to dummy operations, false chatter loops, or vanished mid-transmission. Every time we close in, the trail evaporates. It's not incompetence. It's infiltration. Her words dropped like stones. You're saying the cult has someone on the inside? Another general asked, his tone faltering. Ireland turned to him, her face cold. Not someone. Many. A silence stretched across the room, long, suffocating. We've begun internal sweeps, she continued, but every department we probe reveals more red flags. the administrative branches, judicial enforcement, even our supply chains. Every place we look has cult-friendly signatures embedded so deep we'd have to tear down the entire system to root them out. A whisper of disbelief moved through the table like static. General Corys, normally composed, leaned forward. If what you're saying is true, then we've already lost the intelligence war. No, Ireland said. But we are fighting blind. We underestimated them. The cult of Ascension isn't just a terrorist faction anymore. It's a parasitic ideology. It doesn't need to build new bases, it's already infecting existing ones. Then how do we retaliate? Asked another voice. Who do we strike if we can't find the rot? That was the question, and no one had an answer. The projection at the center of the table shifted, revealing a list of known cult sympathizer events, some 27 planets with potential links, but none confirmed. A few had innocent populations numbering in the millions, and striking any of them down would have catastrophic collateral. We need a scapegoat, Hausa growled. We need to send a message. No, Ireland snapped. We need precision. Because the moment we hit the wrong target, we become the villains. And the cult will use that to paint themselves as the resistance. She stood, letting the weight of her next words settle. We cannot afford to fight this war like the last. This time is not about force. It's about finding a way to wipe them out for good. The room sat heavy in tension. Public pressure for retaliation was mounting fast, but in truth, the government couldn't even settle on a target, let alone strike one. Leo's apartment, the outer housing ring, Twin Fang planet. Leo sat cross-legged at the center of his apartment, the lights dimmed and the room silent, save for the gentle rhythmic beating of his heart in his chest. The only object before him was a thick, leather-bound meditation manual wrapped in layers of mana-sealed parchment, a copied replica of the legendary meditation guide known as the Sevenfold Revelation Codex. He had acquired it days ago. And yet, until now, he had delayed binding with it. Whether due to instinct, uncertainty, or just the sheer weight of knowing the difficulty of mastering this manual, Leo had procrastinated starting on this path for a while. However, he couldn't delay it anymore. His body had now stabilized at the Grandmaster realm, and it was about time he started making his way towards becoming a transcendent tier warrior. Hence, with a quiet exhale, Leo brought his thumb to the edge of a dagger and let blood bead at its tip. He then pressed it firmly onto the sigil etched into the manual's cover. Drip. The moment the blood touched the surface, the manual responded. A surge of pressure pulsed outward as the book lifted into the air on its own, its pages fluttering open as if caught in a phantom breeze. A whirlpool of energy swirled around the room, as threads of mana began linking the manual to Leo's body, latching onto his mana pool like roots drinking from a buried spring. And then, the text began to appear. Elegant script shimmered into existence on the first page, written in a firm, graceful hand that burned golden, as if freshly inked with light. To those who dare learn this codex, the words began. I am Caliph, a man who was once mortal, but is now divine. I created this manual not to show you young warriors how to improve your bodies, nor did I create it to help you expand your mana pool, but rather made it so that you can truly learn how to see in this accursed universe. The universe hides nothing from those who know how to ask the right questions, and to master this manual you must do the same. I climbed the ladder of power and glimpsed the true intent behind people's actions only after I became a demigod, but I now offer this opportunity to you as mortals, and if you do manage to walk this path with discipline, perhaps you can go further than even me. This is the Sevenfold Revelation Codex. It is my gift to all those who idolize me and wish to become like me. However, I must warn you, this method cannot be mastered in solitude. Its secrets cannot be deciphered in the dark. And only by opening your eyes and observing the universe can you learn what it truly wishes to show you. Leo narrowed his eyes slightly as the next set of instructions began forming beneath the preface. Begin by drawing upon your own mana pool. Do not circulate it through your entire body. Instead, guide it gently toward your eyes, not aggressively, but patiently. Concentrate the energy there. Anchor it behind the pupils. Let your eyes become the nexus. The world you perceive must flow through this lens. Once the mana stabilizes behind your optic nerves, do not retreat into stillness. Go outside. Walk among the living. Witness anger, joy, betrayal, conviction. Observe the world and let the stimuli teach you. Let intent become your instructor. The first stage is simple. Recognize emotional intent by observing color. That is all. If you cannot do even this, you are trash unworthy of grasping this technique. Progress in this codex is not measured in time. It is measured in comprehension. And comprehension is earned through experience. For now, your task is to only observe, reflect, endure and repeat. Leo stared at the glowing script for a long moment. There were no circulation charts. No posture diagrams. No breathing patterns. Nothing familiar that he was used to seeing in traditional meditation manuals. Just one directive. Let the world teach you. He exhaled again, slower this time, then closed his eyes briefly as he began drawing from his internal mana pool, guiding it slowly and deliberately up toward his optic centers. As the flow settled behind his eyes, he felt a warmth begin to build. It wasn't painful, but it surely did not feel comfortable to pool mana behind such a sensitive organ. However, since this was what the manual required, he did it regardless. And then, as he opened his eyes again, he half expected the world around him to have changed. He expected to see colors he never saw before, or to see a jumbled mess of intents floating around him. However, he saw nothing of the sort. There was nothing different about his surroundings, nor did his vision feel any sharper, as he raised his eyebrow in disappointment. Well, that sure was anticlimactic, he muttered to himself, before standing up and walking towards the door, as he followed the manual's instructions and decided to venture out into the world, hoping that perhaps going out would show him something that he could not find within his own apartment. Leo walked the full length of the outer housing ring with mana still softly pulsing behind his eyes. He observed everything. He passed by open balconies where children of guild members laughed and fought over fruit peels. He sat at a corner food stall and watched the merchant argue with a customer over price, but the argument revealed no hidden shade, no flare of anger given chromatic life. He moved through crowded alleys, into silent meditative gardens, even through the bustling court plaza of the civilian sector, and still, nothing changed. He saw no distortions, no anomalies, no hidden layers, as the world around him remained exactly the same. Even when he focused, truly focused, on the subtle changes in people's posture, eye movement, gestures of frustration or tension, it all looked normal. Unenhanced. Mundane. And even when he somehow found a teenage couple locked in a heartfelt embrace, expecting a burst of joy to register in violet or gold around them, he saw nothing. As no matter the emotion, he perceived nothing that he should have as per the manual. Is this manual truly what it claims to be? Leo wondered, as he doubted if he had been sold a dupe. Had Caliph really mastered anything at all, or was this some philosophical drivel sold as mysticism? The longer he walked, the more he questioned. Not just the manual, but his choice in choosing to master it. As all the manual promised in the first place was a vague promise of revelation through observation, and that couldn't be quantified by time. Eventually, as he crossed the final stretch of the outer ring and approached his apartment building again, he let out a slow breath, realizing that he had seen nothing useful today at all. He perceived no emotions painted in color, nor any flashes of intent that could reveal the secrets of the universe. As at this point, he genuinely wondered if he'd made a mistake by choosing the Sevenfold Revelation Codex. However, although he momentarily panicked, he almost immediately stabilized as he understood that it was probably too early to judge the technique just yet. Twin Fang Planet, Day 3 of Codex Training. 2 days quickly passed since Leo had first bound with the Sevenfold Revelation Codex, and not once during that span did he manage to spot even a flicker of what the manual promised. Whether it was joy, guilt, hostility, or affection, nothing in his surroundings shimmered with color, and no layer of hidden truth revealed itself through his eyes. Still, he did not stop. He continued to pool mana behind his retinas from the moment he awoke until the hour he returned to bed, as for every second he was awake, he tried to comprehend the secrets of the universe. On the third day, as he stepped toward the door of his apartment to begin another long walk around the city, he paused abruptly when his foot brushed against a folded sheet of parchment resting silently on the floor. The folded sheet bore no official seal, no insignia, only his name on the front, written in dark ink. To Leo Skyshard, it said, as Leo bent down, picked it up and unfolded the letter with a calm flick of his fingers. Greater than, table 33. Same cafe. Come 5 minutes before noon. Raiden. That was all. Leo stared at the note for a brief moment before tucking it away into his inner sleeve. His mana remained steadily pooled behind his eyes as he ventured out and continued with his morning walk, deciding to carry on with his day as usual until it was time for the meeting to commence. He figured Raiden's goal was to formally introduce the team to one another, and since he had been meaning to evaluate them anyway, the timing of the invitation couldn't have been more perfect. Exactly 5 minutes before noon, Leo stepped into the quiet interior of the Venom Lily Bistro, the cafe door clicking shut behind him as the familiar scent of bitter roast, oiled steel, and polished wood filled his nose. He moved forward without pause, eyes scanning the surroundings only once before they landed on table 33, which was tucked away in the dim back corner of the cafe, near a soundproofed wall, where Raiden already sat with 4 others. Leo didn't rush his walk, nor did he hesitate after making eye contact with the team, as he continued to walk at his own steady pace until he reached his destination. "Ah, Skyshard. Right on time," Raiden said, as he gestured for Leo to take a seat. Raiden himself sat at the head of the table, fingers laced before him, posture straight as ever. His silver-streaked hair gleamed faintly under the restaurant's muted lighting, and he seemed to be wearing his usual warm smile. To his right, lounging with one boot kicked up on the edge of her seat, was a woman with slick brown hair tied in a high tail, and a neon-pink bubblegum sphere inflating from her mouth as she gave Leo a lazy once-over. She wore a skin-tight black assassin suit that left very little to the imagination and even less to armor, with a thigh holster and half-zipped collar that suggested she cared more about allure than protection. Her eyes glittered with amusement as she made eye contact with him, lips curling into a smile as she winked. "Hey there, circuit champ," she said seductively, as Leo felt a chill run down his spine, forcing him to quickly look at the next person. On Raiden's left sat a young man in a loose combat tunic that was easily 2 sizes too big for his lanky frame. He was clearly not a killer, nor someone who looked very confident in general as he sat hunched forward with his shoulders nervously bundled. His long scarf looked like it could double as a blanket, and he kept fidgeting with a wooden spoon between his fingers like it was a talisman. His eyes flicked toward Leo for a moment, then away, then back again, as he clearly looked uneasy to be here. "Who is this bum?" Leo thought as a small frown formed over his face. Nonetheless, he moved on and checked out the last new face on the table, as sitting right next to him was a wall of a man. The hulking brute sat with a thick mat of chest hair exposed through his unbuttoned shirt, and arms the size of tree trunks folded across his barrel-like torso. He leaned back in his chair with a toothpick dancing between his teeth, a storm gray beard shadowing his square jaw. The man didn't look at Leo. He didn't need to. His presence alone was enough to declare that he noticed everything. And finally, at the edge of the table, seated with one foot resting on the seat edge, forearm draped across his knee, was Cypher. He offered Leo a small, familiar nod, his smile casual, but his eyes sharp as always. As it was at this moment that Raiden rose slightly, and gestured to the chair Leo was sitting at as he addressed the team. "Leo. Glad you came," he began, as Leo gave him a small nod in return. "You said you wanted to evaluate the team," Raiden said plainly. "Let me save you the time." He turned first to the red-haired woman, who was now popping her gum again with a loud crack. "This is Patricia. Lockpicker, tracker, poison specialist, and a big flirt. She can extract a buried toxin capsule from a rotting beast skull faster than most people can draw a weapon, but she'll do it while asking for your number." Patricia gave a mock salute with 2 fingers, followed by a finger gun and a wink. Charmed, darling. Raiden shifted to the jittery boy. Carl. A mercenary, not an assassin. Contracted for this mission only. He's our survivalist, healer and terrain expert. He's good with maps. Better with cooking food. And the only man here who won't stab you in your sleep, mostly because he doesn't have the guts to do it. Carl offered a nervous laugh. That's not inaccurate. Then, Raiden turned to the mountain of muscle chewing his toothpick. And that's Bob, he said reverently, as if Bob's name alone needed no more explanation. Leo's brow twitched ever so slightly in confusion, and perhaps noticing it, Patricia leaned in as she whispered conspiratorially, "Have you ever heard of the Ghoul Nest Massacre?" Yeah, that was him. Supposedly cleared out 2 entire cult strongholds on foot. With nothing but a fork. Leo raised an eyebrow and Bob slowly turned his head, his eyes meeting Leo's. "You're sittin' on my side of the table, boy. Scoot," he demanded, as Leo blinked once, and then shifted his chair slightly to the right, as Bob nodded in approval. Raiden didn't comment. He simply motioned toward Leo and said, "And this is Leo Skyshard. I'm sure most of you have seen the kid fight at the circuits, but if not, well, I can vouch for his skills. He'll be joining us for the mission. If he decides he likes what he sees." Then turning towards Leo, he asked, "So, Skyshard, what do you think? We have Cypher who has gathered all the knowledge there is to gather on how to survive in a time-stilled world. Myself, a veteran assassin. Bob, the legend. Patricia the beauty. Carl the cook. And yourself if you choose to join. I think we have a good shot of clearing the mission if you join us, so what do you say?" He asked again, as all eyes anticipatingly turned towards Leo. Twin Fang Planet, Venom Lily Bistro, Table 33. Everyone expectantly looked at Leo, waiting for an answer, as he sat back slightly in his chair, his arms still resting calmly on the table while his eyes moved from one face to the next, carefully assessing the team. He started by evaluating their power levels, as he performed an instinctive scan of their aura density, breathing rhythm, and unconscious suppression of presence. And here, it seemed like Raiden and Cypher had done their research well. Each member of the team, whether it was Patricia, Bob, Cypher, or Raiden himself, exuded the calm, centered weight of Grandmasters. Their mana cores were stable. Their spirit undisturbed. While Carl, with his timid glances and soft presence, lacked that edge, hovering faintly at the master tier. Leo didn't mind that. Every team needed a support, and Carl didn't give off the delusion of being more than he was, which made him perfect for the role. Next, Leo moved on to assessing the balance of the party. And, to be fair, it seemed well constructed. The team had 2 seasoned combatants in Raiden and Bob. Cypher filled the role of the scout-scholar with his theoretical grounding in time-stilled anomalies. Patricia was the poison master, with specialties in infiltration and terrain mapping. And finally, Carl played the role of the survivalist support who was a field medic, cooking the perfect bait for the team to sacrifice should the situation calls for it. And as an added bonus, it seemed like the team was cohesive as a whole, as although they had not undertaken any missions together yet, nobody seemed to have too bloated of an ego that made them feel bigger than the collective unit. "It's not a bad lineup," Leo acknowledged, as his thoughts drifted towards the personality dynamics of the group. Bob's gruff stoicism and Patricia's flamboyant teasing were both strong flavors. But Leo didn't mind them too much. Strong personalities meant strong minds. And strong minds were far harder to corrode in the madness of a time-stilled world than weak ones that bent with every shift in atmosphere. Which was why, in a way, he preferred having team members with such unique traits. Sigh. He let out a small breath, before making his mind as he said, "I'm in," his voice even. Raiden smiled faintly, when Leo accepted the proposal, as the entire table raised their glasses at once in cheer. However, before anyone could toast or have a sip, Leo interrupted the celebrations as he said, "Before we move forward, I need to know how we're handling loot division, and how the party plans to stock resources. If I'm putting my life on the line for this mission, I want the logistics straight." Leo added, his tone sharpening just a touch. Patricia let out a low whistle at his words, as she leaned back, and crossed one of her legs over the other. Straight to the boring part, huh? I like it, she said, rolling her eyes in disapproval, as she clearly did not enjoy the technical conversations. Huff. Bob grunted in approval but didn't speak. While Raiden nodded, his fingers interlaced again as he prepared to lay out the structure of loot distribution. Of course, let's go over everything, he said, as he put up 6 fingers. The total loot is worth 6.5 billion MP. And we are 6 members in total. Off that 6.5 billion, Carl's share, should he survive till the end, is fixed at 500 million MP. Which leaves 6 billion for the 5 of us, Raiden explained as he put down 1 finger. Off that 6 billion, we all get paid 1.2 billion each. Each of us having an equal split in the main loot, should we complete the mission. However, myself and Cypher have first priority on anything else that we find within the time-stilled world. So should we come across any dead bodies of criminals or find some ancient artifact in that world, Cypher and myself shall have the first right to choose whether we want it or not, and we will not be splitting that loot. Yes, we will still compensate you fairly in the form of MP once the mission is over for any item we picked. However, as for the item itself, we will always have priority of choice, Raiden clarified, as Leo gave him a rather evil smile. It wasn't unfair to want priority on loot, however, to not compensate all members evenly for such items found was pushing their luck too much, as, if in the end the expedition ended in a failure and they were forced to return early with nothing but some individual items they found along the way, then the largest chunk of profit would go to Raiden and Cypher while the rest of them would be left begging for scraps. Interesting. And the rest of you are okay with it? Leo asked, as Patricia shrugged her shoulders in response, while Bob continued to ignore him like he did not even exist. It's not unfair when you realize that myself and Cypher are sponsoring everything from the food and mana stones we will need in that world, to hiring a cook to accompany us on this suicide mission. It will set both of us back by 150,000 megapixels each, so the risk that we are taking is not minimal either. That's money we have saved by working hard for the past 5 years. It's not a small amount, Cypher argued, as Leo let out a dry laugh. To be fair, they weren't wrong, the two of them were taking all the risks here and hence it was only natural that they take a bigger share. However, Leo still wanted to tease them over it for a bit before agreeing. What quality of mana stones are you sponsoring? I'm sure you know that the better quality ones last longer, Leo pointed out, as Cypher's eyes widened in surprise. Did you already read everything in the archives? That was fast, he said, sounding nervous, as he tried to avoid the topic. I asked you a question. Captain, what's the grade of stones you will sponsor us with? Leo asked again, as this time a nervous Raiden was forced to answer. Low-grade ones. We were thinking about low-grade ones, he admitted, as Leo wagged his finger in denial. Medium-grade stones at the minimum. The better quality stones last longer, you know it too. And if we don't have the budget for high-grade ones, we should at least buy medium grades, Leo demanded, as Patricia and Bob instantly nodded in agreement. The sexy man has a point here, we want better mana stones. Patricia added. Don't be cheap, ya punks, Bob said, as under the group pressure, Raiden eventually caved. Alright. Although it will set me back another 70,000 megapixels, I'll make sure to buy the medium-grade ones. Happy? He asked, as only now did Leo nod in approval. His plan was to secure a heap of medium-grade stones from Raiden, and to then also buy some purest high-grade stones for his own personal use, as part of his preparation to go into the time-stilled world. Twin Fang Planet, just outside the Venom Lily Bistro, following the team meeting. After accepting Leo's demand to supply the team with medium-grade stones, Raiden informed everyone that they would be departing for the expedition in exactly 3 days' time. Before they departed, each team member also had to visit the Black Serpents Guild headquarters and sign an official contract that would confirm and bind them to all the terms they had discussed in today's meeting. Everything from the loot splits, mission conditions, survival clauses, and resource sponsorship was going to be mentioned in the contract, leaving no room for ambiguity, so that everyone knew exactly what they were getting themselves into once the expedition began. It was a formality, but one that ensured everyone stayed aligned once they entered the time-stilled world, as it was the most efficient way to minimize confusion and future disputes before they even arose. Leo didn't object. In fact, he barely nodded at all when Raiden explained the technicalities, as his mind already began drifting elsewhere. Because even as the group stood, scattered, and drifted out of the Venom Lily Bistro with casual goodbyes and murmured parting jokes, Leo had much darker thoughts clouding his mind. He knew very well that his alliance with this team was doomed to fail from the start. After all, unlike the team, he wasn't participating in this expedition for the money, and was more interested in the opportunity to enter the vault. And for that, it was inevitable that, toward the end of the expedition, he would have to betray and kill them all, ensuring he was the sole survivor and final decision-maker when the time came to claim the rewards. As he simply had no use for a billion MP and would rather just take the chance to enter the vault, so that he could steal the scroll and quickly become the next dragon. I'll separate from them early if they start losing their minds, or I'll kill the survivors at the end and take everything for myself, Leo thought, already certain that he wasn't going to walk out of the time-stilled world with the same people he entered with. Aside from Bob and Raiden, he felt confident in his ability to dispatch the others without much trouble. And as for those two, he intended to kill them too, if the world itself didn't do the job first. Hence, while the others shared goodbyes, he simply slipped away without fanfare, making his way towards the Twin Fang City's central commercial ring, where the best merchant shops were located. His goal was simple, as he wanted to secure every resource necessary to survive alone inside the time-stilled world. As although Raiden had promised to supply the essentials, Leo had no intention of relying on anyone but himself. If the time came to double-cross the team early, he wanted to be fully equipped to walk the rest of the path alone and live to claim the reward, and hence he made his preparations with that grim future already in mind. Twin Fang Planet, Central Commercial Ring, Merchant Sector. Leo chose to visit the Orange Panther's merchant store to make his purchase, as it had the reputation to sell the best quality products, although slightly overpriced compared to the rest of the market. The store interior was clean and the shopping atmosphere was silent, as apart from him there was only one other customer currently browsing items. The soft scent of tonic herbs lingered in the air, and a group of respectful staff members bowed at him as he entered. Before him stood rows upon rows of shelves stood neatly aligned, each displaying a different category of item: healing salves, bone binders, mana infusions, detox syrups, compressed rations, portable filters, enchanted bandages, elemental fire suppressants, and dozens of other adventurer-grade supplies. Leo took one glance across the organized layout, noting how each row was divided not just by type but by grade, as there seemed to be a clear transition from the cheap stuff near the door to the premium wares locked behind a single mana barrier at the far end of the hall. "Sir, how can I assist you today? Are you shopping for a particular expedition or?" a staff member politely asked, approaching him with a smile. However, Leo cut him off rather coldly. "I'm okay," he replied without glancing at the staff. "Just looking around." The assistant hesitated, then bowed slightly and stepped away as Leo turned his attention back to the shelves. A basic healing potion, sealed in a small, pale blue vial, was priced at just 30 megapixels. But just a row over, the intermediate version gleamed a brighter shade of blue, and was sealed in a taller glass bottle that was marked at 3000. Whereas finally, at the far end, under protective casing, stood 3 bottles of high-grade healing potions, a pure sky blue in hue, but each bottle priced at 30,000 megapixels. So the price rises exponentially with grade, Leo realized, as he sighed and picked up all 3. Before also picking up 5 bottles of intermediate-grade healing potions and placing them in his shopping cart. Next, his eyes shifted next to the bone regeneration segment. The cheap ones were barely more than flavored sugar water, but the highest-grade vial, sealed with 2 bands and a spell-locked cork, looked promising, as he picked up one. 2 high-grade stamina potions joined the pile next. Then a dozen mana regeneration potions, a series of ointments and burn treatments, a small box of bandage kits, and 3 vials labeled Hemicloth that were marketed to halt bleeding instantly through mana pulsed application. Then he made his way down the center aisle and reached the mana stone counter. Most shelves were filled with low-grade, misty stones, faintly pulsing. But near the top shelf, protected beneath a silent alarm seal, sat 2 high-grade mana stones. They were crystal clear with a deep swirling core, priced at 50,000 megapixels each. He took both. The weight of his selections was evident as when he eventually approached the billing counter, the shopkeeper behind it looked up, bored at first, then froze as he began scanning the items one by one. Potion after potion, stone after stone, the registered tally rose higher and higher until it finally halted at 503,600 megapixels. The man's fingers visibly trembled. "Yes, sir," he stammered, adjusting his spectacles. "Would you prefer a private lounge while we process this? We usually don't have transactions of this scale outside of bulk orders." "No need," Leo replied coolly as he pulled out a cashier's check and slid it across the counter. The shopkeeper examined it with both his eyes and a mana verification crystal, and the moment it cleared, his entire demeanor changed. "Thank you very much for your patronage, Mr. Skyshard. If there's anything else we can assist you with today." Leo raised a hand, then paused for a moment before speaking again. "Do you deal in poison formulas?" The shopkeeper blinked, then nodded quickly. "We do. Though such matters are processed through the Poisoners Union. Typically, we pay a signing fee based on the formula's grade, effectiveness, and ease of replication. If it's approved for market use, you receive 10% royalty on all future sales. Do you have something you wish to submit for assessment?" he asked, as Leo pulled a folded sheet of parchment from his inner pocket and placed it on the counter, neatly pressing it down. "Check this out. Let me know how much I'll be paid for the patent," he said as the man took the paper carefully, as if it were made of fragile glass, and slid it into a rune-inscribed case, nodding with a touch of awe. "Of course. Please return in 2 days. Our alchemists will evaluate it thoroughly." Leo gave a faint nod, turned on his heel, and stepped back out into the street without another word. He had been spending heavily, and while his reserves could handle it for now, monetizing the poison formula could just secure him a fallback stream for the future. It was for this reason that he decided to hand over the poison formula he received from Severus at Rodova, hoping that it would generate a passive stream of income. 2 days. Let's see how much I can make from this formula. As depending on how much I get, I may shop some more, he thought, as he moved to the next shop to buy some food and general resources. 2 days later, Twin Fang Planet, Poisoners Union, internal lab chambers. How long has it been soaking? 2 hours exactly. Eric adjusted his gloves with deliberate precision as he watched the lab rat twitch slightly in the glass enclosure, its movements growing sluggish, its breathing shallower. Across from him, Master Ralver leaned over a table cluttered with notes, jars, mana reagents, and a steaming beaker marked with Leo's submitted formula. The test chamber was sealed. Ventilation units hummed overhead, and 3 insect cages had already been set aside, each one filled with collapsed bodies of beetles and flies that had stopped moving 20 minutes ago. Still no signs of visible reaction. None. No smell. No color. No taste. We mixed it with mashed fruit paste and every subject consumed it fully. Eric nodded slowly, his eyes narrowing with interest. But the real brilliance of this poison is that it doesn't kill. It weakens. Quietly. Almost elegantly. Strength reduced, mana output reduced, cognitive processing lowered. Ralver tapped the side of the rat's enclosure with a metal stick. The rat flinched, then stumbled as if dazed. Down 50% in all parameters. Blood pressure stable, heart rate slightly low, but nothing to set off alarms unless someone does a full diagnostic. It mimics fatigue. Eric raised an eyebrow. So it's useless for assassination but perfect for cheating in underground fighting rings. Exactly. They both turned to look at the chart projected onto the floating screen above, which showed the before and after metrics of the rat's vitals. The market value for this poison won't come from nobles or guilds. It'll come from gamblers, underground circuit fighters and mob bosses looking for a way to rig duels. Eric exhaled with a slight laugh. They'll pay through the nose for something like this. Because it's not banned, yet. And even if it does get banned, detection will be hell. What about manufacturing complexity and shelf life? Ralver flipped open the formula page. Easy to produce. No rare ingredients. Shelf stable for 6 months. Eric smiled. Then we put it through. Let's mark it at 10 million megapixels for the patent acquisition and 10% royalty on all future market units sold. Agreed, Ralver said as he stamped the approval slip. What's it called again? Eric glanced down at the form. Doesn't have a name, but it's been submitted through the Orange Panthers branch here in Twin City. We can ask them tomorrow. Ralver chuckled. Well, this is quite a unique product for sure. If we can control its supply, we can charge a huge premium for each bottle sold. Let's just hope we can get a patent for 10, because this is easily worth 30 to 50 million for the formulation alone. The two poison masters exchanged one last glance before sealing the vial, the paperwork, and the approval slip into a vault safe case. Hopefully they could make a bank with this one. That same evening, Leo visited the Orange Panthers branch to check on the value of his poison formula, and as soon as he walked through the now familiar entrance, the staff who recognized him from his last purchase straightened instinctively, their gazes flicking toward the back room as someone immediately darted off to inform the manager. Moments later, the same shopkeeper who had handled his transaction last time came rushing out with a scroll clutched tightly in hand, his eyes wide, face flushed with disbelief. Mr. Skyshard, he said breathlessly, holding up the scroll like a sacred artifact, you're not going to believe this. Leo calmly reached out and took the scroll from him, unrolling it with a flick of his fingers, as his eyes scanned the parchment. Greater than offer from Poisoners Union. Patent valuation, 10 million megapixels. Royalty agreement, 10% on all future sales, pending product launch. Leo's eyebrow twitched slightly, the only outward sign of surprise. He hadn't expected a full 10 million. He had considered the formula to be useful, yes, but he hadn't thought it would be this valuable. However, more than him, it was the shopkeeper who looked as if he had just discovered a vault of gold. I get 1% of the signing fee as the discovery agent, the man whispered, almost in a daze. That's 100,000 MP in my account. Just like that, gods above. Leo was about to hand the scroll back when the man suddenly straightened, eyes sparking with something more than gratitude. Wait, sir, don't accept this offer yet. Leo glanced at him, mildly curious. You can push back, the shopkeeper insisted, his voice sharp now with urgency. That's their initial number. They always lowball the first offer, especially when it comes from new creators who don't know the system. Leo raised an eyebrow. And you're telling me this because? The man gave a sheepish smile. Normally I wouldn't. I mean, the union's politics are none of my business. But this time, with how big the numbers are, my cut gets bigger the higher the final value climbs. He leaned in slightly, lowering his voice as if sharing a secret. Push for 40 million, sir. Minimum. I've worked here 20 years. I know how the higher-ups think. This formula is perfect for the underground doping market. Discreet, effective, and long-lasting. They'll pay. Leo stared at him for a long moment before folding the scroll back and handing it back to the shopkeeper. Very well, he said. You handle the negotiations. Get me 40 or more, and I'll add another 1% from my share on top of whatever the union gives you. The man blinked, stunned, before his lips curled into a slow, grateful smile. You won't regret it, Mr. Skyshard. I'll squeeze them until they pay a hell lot more. Leo gave a faint nod, then turned to check out the restocked items in the store as he purchased a couple more high-grade mana stones for his expedition tomorrow. With Severus's poison formula rated so highly, he did not need to worry about money in the short term at least, regardless of what final value it fetched. After stepping out of the Orange Panthers store, Leo resumed his practice with the Sevenfold Revelation Codex, continuing what had become a daily ritual of quietly funneling mana behind his eyes and walking the length of Twin Fang City without pause. And yet, like every day prior to this one, he saw nothing of note. He uncovered no hidden secrets of the universe, perceived no swirling auras of emotion, and failed to pick up even the faintest hint of the revelations that the Codex promised to lay bare. His mind, tempered by Monarch's indifference, remained steady as always, but even so, there was a limit to how much he could pretend that this wasn't getting under his skin. Because no matter how much mana he circulated or how long he let it settle behind his optic nerves, no matter how many faces he studied, footsteps he tracked, or interactions he witnessed, the results remained the same. As in the end, he saw nothing. How the hell am I supposed to unlock hidden truths just by staring at people? Am I supposed to magically see into their soul or something? He thought bitterly, jaw tightening as he made his way out of the merchant's district. Fuck me. This technique is a scam. He cursed under his breath as he turned the corner, ready to return to his apartment and consider other methods of training, when suddenly, something caught his eye. A flicker. Just for a second. In the glass pane of a shopfront he had just passed, a faint ripple of color shimmered against the reflection of his own body, a maroonish trail originating from his back. It was gone the moment he turned to look, like a ghost slipping back into the void, but for that split second, he was certain of what he had seen. Maroon. A deep, simmering maroon that had appeared to pulse outward from his own silhouette. He narrowed his eyes slightly, retracing his steps and staring at the glass again, but the color didn't return. Still, the image lingered in his mind. And even if it had lasted for less than a breath, Leo knew better than to dismiss it entirely. Especially since, for the first time since binding with the Codex, he had finally seen something. And it hadn't come from the world around him. It had come from within. I haven't gone insane, have I? I'm not manifesting colors just because my mind is so desperate to see them, right? Leo wondered, his pace slowing ever so slightly as he kept glancing toward the nearest reflective surfaces, windows, display screens, metal door panels, anything that might betray even the faintest echo of that maroon shimmer he had seen. But the moment never repeated. For the rest of the day, he roamed through the commercial lanes, circled the outer housing ring, even passed by the meditation gardens near the Guild Square, yet nowhere in his reflection, nor in the world around him, did the maroon pulse return. It was nightfall by the time he returned to his apartment, where he immediately set about packing for the expedition scheduled for tomorrow, preferring to finish it all tonight so he could sleep without the burden of rushing through preparations come morning. His movements were calm, precise, and nearly silent, as he folded spare robes into compression pouches, checked the tightness of his dagger straps, organized the various potions he had purchased earlier, and arranged his high-grade mana stones inside a reinforced, foam-lined case. Everything had its place. Everything was accounted for. And although he expected to see no change in the meditation manual laying around on the edge of his desk, as he picked it up to store away in his storage ring, he casually flipped it open, only to be shocked by what he found inside. New text had appeared. The pages, once blank after the last instruction, now pulsed faintly with a soft golden glow as words carved themselves across the parchment with slow, deliberate grace as if someone were writing it in real time. Greater than, you have seen the first glimmer. Greater than, frustration. It clouded your aura in a shade only you could recognize, maroon, born from the dissonance between effort and expectation. Greater than, that is the nature of this path. Greater than, before you seek the truth in others, you must first uncover it within yourself. Each individual perceives emotion through a personal lens, and no two will see the same color for the same feeling. Greater than, learn the spectrum of your own being. Leo's eyes slowly narrowed as he kept reading, his back unconsciously straightening. Greater than, map your moods. Observe your fluctuations. Learn how guilt sits in your chest. How pride shifts your posture. How suspicion makes your breath pause. Greater than, you must see these changes not with instinct, but with vision. Greater than, only once you can track the shades of your own emotions, will you be able to pierce the veil around others. The text slowly faded after that, as if it had never been there in the first place. Only the gentle heat of the page beneath his fingertips remained, a subtle reminder that the codex had indeed responded. That it had actually acknowledged his progress. Tap. Leo closed the manual gently, his expression unreadable, as he tossed it into his storage ring. So the maroon I saw was my frustration, and I wasn't hallucinating, he thought, as he got the confirmation he needed that he had indeed made some progress today. He didn't know what would come next, or how long the road to mastering even the very first layer of the sevenfold revelation codex would be. But for the first time since binding with the manual, he felt like he had a tangible direction to work on. Observe emotions within your own body first. That was the first step. The next morning arrived quickly, as Leo stirred from his light sleep and rose without a sound. He stepped into the bathroom, washed his face, and changed swiftly into his assassin robes, the dark black fabric fitting snugly over his frame as he tightened the utility belts and concealed the inner daggers. From the corner table, he retrieved the small black storage ring that contained all his personal supplies, mana stones, potions, maps, rations, and a few carefully chosen utility items such as ropes, torch, etc. Looping a fine chain through the storage ring, he hung it around his neck and tucked it beneath his robes, pressing the fabric down flat so that no outline showed. He knew better than to flaunt such an item openly, especially among fellow assassins, as hidden advantages were only useful if no one else knew you had them. Once satisfied, he gave the apartment one final glance, then stepped out into the corridor and shut the door behind him, his footsteps quiet as ever. With everything finally in place, he began making his way toward the docking area, where the rest of his team would probably be waiting for him to depart. It was a 20-minute walk from his apartment, which could be cut down to 10 if he hurried, however, he did not. Since there was no guarantee that any of them would return alive from that cursed world, Leo kept his pace unhurried and allowed himself to savor the crisp morning air for as long as it lasted, because he knew very well that once he stepped into that distorted realm, there was no guarantee on when, or if, he'd ever enjoy such a simple luxury of breathing fresh morning air ever again. Twin Fang Planet, the departure bay. Leo arrived at the hangar bay last of all team members. The transport craft was already stationed at the center of the launch zone by the time he arrived, and it was an aircraft unlike anything he had ever seen before. It was a gray craft with its surface plated with tiles containing runic engravings and light-absorbing paint that screamed discretion and lethality. It was apparently a fighter-type craft, that was usually used to deploy guild members into highly volatile war zones, however, was being used as a simple transport ship today. The insignia of the Black Serpents Guild gleamed near the tail of the craft, as Leo gave it a twice-over before looking towards the team. The rest of them had already assembled near the boarding ramp. Raiden stood near the center of the craft with his arms folded and stylish sunglasses covering his eyes. Cypher stood to his left with a data slate in his hands, while Patricia chewing gum loaded a weapons rack onto the craft. Carl stood nervously over a large backpack almost half his size, as he double-checked his supplies with trembling fingers, and Bob leaned casually against the aircraft, chewing his toothpick with the same blank indifference he seemed to wear for all occasions. "You're just on time," Raiden said as he spotted Leo, as he walked over and handed him a small spatial pouch. "Your share of the supplies. Food, rations, spare clothes, 2 emergency mana flares, and a backup transmitter to locate the entrance," Raiden explained, as Leo flipped it open, to briefly scan the contents, before clipping it to his utility belt with a subtle nod. No further words were exchanged as the team made their way into the aircraft. Once seated inside, the interior sealed shut with a hiss and the engines activated with a soft, low hum. The craft soon lifted off the ground, rising smoothly through the vertical shaft before accelerating into the atmosphere, as the team officially found themselves en route to the time-stilled world. Then, once a few minutes had passed, Cypher rose from his seat, holding a slim black tablet. "All right, listen up," "We've got some intel to run through," he said, as he projected a three-dimensional map into the center of the aircraft using a mana projector embedded into the floor panel. A vaguely sketched diagram of warped terrain, uneven landmasses, floating islands, and unsure dark regions appeared midair. This map was drawn by Monarch Dupravel Nuna during his last expedition into the time-stilled world. The guild's archivists have since worked on his crude drawing skills a bit and have turned it into something resembling a functional topographical guide. He pointed at a central point. "This here is our insertion zone. The terrain surrounding it is unpredictable and shifts fast, but can be considered semi-stable compared to the rest of the world, as our real problem starts from here," he said as he gestured towards a forest-type region full of trees. "The forest of death is where things start to get really spooky, as everything in there wants to kill you, whether it's the plant life or the beasts. We have to basically find a way to survive it, then move on to the floating islands region, then the dark pockets, then through some sort of a mountain range, and finally reach our destination, which is some sort of an ancient castle. Or at least we hope it is," Cypher said, sounding unsure, as he shook his head and tried to move on quickly from the uncertainty. "The castle is where we are supposed to find a rare and indestructible metal alloy, and the goal of this entire mission is to enter that castle and retrieve that alloy," Cypher said slowly, making sure that everyone heard the words coming out of his mouth clearly. "According to the briefing that the guild gave me before the mission began, we are supposed to retrieve about 2 kilograms worth of that alloy, or as much as we find, and our rewards will apparently be increased if we manage to bring back more than 2 kgs, Cypher said, as Patricia whistled low at his words. "All this trouble for a shiny little rock. If only a man went to such lengths to make me a wedding ring. Because if he did, I might just say yes and settle down. Even if for just a few days," she said, before giving Carl a wink, as the poor boy blushed to his ears. "Indestructible metal means you could probably just use it to forge a sword that never dulls, right? Surely worth a fortune," Carl muttered, trying to hide his embarrassment. However, nobody responded to his words, making him feel even more embarrassed. "The guild doesn't care what it becomes. They just want it retrieved. And so that's all we should care about as well," Raiden declared after a while, as nobody asked any more stupid questions. What happened with the retrieved loot was a discussion better suited for their return trip, as for now, they first needed to focus on how to survive time-stilled world first. Although the rest of the trip passed by in relative silence, alarm bells began to blare in Leo's head based on a small line that Cypher mentioned while showing the map. Cypher said that Dupravel himself had drawn a map of that world, which meant that Dupravel had been inside that world. However, what Leo did not understand was why, if Dupravel attempted this mission himself, did the guild still need weaklings like him to retrieve the metal for? After all, if Dupravel had already been there, then the mission should have already been completed. And if not, then how could the guild even expect that any other member could do it when Dupravel himself failed? Something about this doesn't add up. I've suddenly got a bad feeling about this mission, Leo thought as his instincts began churning uneasily beneath his calm exterior. However, despite the discomfort, he managed to keep his cool and somehow appear indifferent, as he knew better than to show his nerves now. It was already too late for him to turn back and chicken out, and hence he decided to hold strong and put on his bravest face. Even if it was just a facade. Aboard the Black Serpent's Guild craft, en route to the spatial tier. It had been 2 hours since they left the atmosphere of Twin Fang City, when the captain of the aircraft finally announced that they would approach the spatial tear in T-12 minutes. Up till this point, all that Leo observed through his window was an endless stretch of black. As most of what he saw in this journey was the silent void between planets, that was untouched by wind, sound, or sun. The stars barely flickered in the distance, far too faint to give warmth, and the team sat within the craft rather peacefully, each seemingly lost in their own thoughts as the fighter craft cut across the cosmos at unbelievable speeds. Then, the distortion appeared. At first it was a speck, just a faint glint in the dark, like a faraway light being emitted from a lighthouse. But as they neared, the anomaly grew in scale, and its unnatural nature became impossible to ignore. The spatial tear was shaped like a vertical gash in space itself, hovering between systems with no anchor, no orbit and no mass. It appeared like an oval mirror of sorts, with reality itself folding inwards around its edges, as if the laws of the universe were bending to accommodate its presence. A membrane of rainbow lights seemed to cover its entry, and from this side, it was impossible to discern as to what may be going on the other end. So this is what a tear in space looks like, Leo thought to himself, as this was completely unlike anything he ever saw in space textbooks before. Whir! The hum of the engine intensified as the aircraft decelerated. Inside the cabin, the runic circuits flared to life as the onboard enchantments activated. The hull groaned once, then stabilized as low vibrations began to echo from beneath everyone's seats. We'll breach the entry point of the time-stilled world in 30 seconds. Everyone, check your seatbelts. This isn't a soft ride, Raiden warned, as he raised his arms to catch everyone's attention. Listening to his words, Patricia immediately tightened her straps, while Bob adjusted his posture slightly. Carl muttered something under his breath as he clutched the seat handle. And Leo simply narrowed his eyes and leaned slightly forward, watching the tear grow larger through the viewing port, as the craft approached the entry point. Then, crack, THWMMM. The moment the nose of the aircraft pierced the boundary, reality shattered. Not literally, but that's how it felt. Like every physical law had just convulsed. Time twisted, gravity reversed, and for a single disorienting second, Leo felt as though his body had folded in on itself. A deep, resonating pressure clamped down on his chest, like he was being buried beneath invisible weight as his mana spiraled, his heartbeat stuttered and his vision split into double frames. The fuck? He wondered, almost clutching his head in pain, when suddenly, almost as fast as the disorientation appeared, it disappeared as well. Color returned to his eyes, shapes and figures solidified, and the craft successfully managed to burst through to the other side. They had successfully entered the time-stilled world. As Leo gazed out of the window, the first thing he noticed was the twilight darkness covering the sky. It was a disturbing shade of darkness, an eerie blend of charred gray, streaked with sickly orange, faded violet, and occasional hints of red that bled across the sky like bruises on rotting flesh. There was something about it that felt deeply unnatural, a kind of oppressive palette that made the world feel heavier just by looking at it, like even the colors themselves were tired of existing in this world. Islands floated where land should not exist, and streaks of distorted light cut unidentified paths across the air like lightning frozen in time. So this is the time-stilled world, Leo thought, as the aircraft stabilized for only a few moments before the cabin lights turned red and the emergency eject lights began to blink. The captain will open the rear ejection bay now. We have a 30-second window to jump. Grab your parachutes and get ready, Raiden said, as he was the first to grab his parachute and line up near the evacuation door. We can't stay inside this zone for more than 60 seconds. The shielding won't hold past that. Be fast, Cypher added, as he lined up right behind Raiden. Then, as soon as the door opened, Raiden first kicked down the supply crates, before leaping behind them as he vanished through the hatch, his silhouette dropping into the swirling haze below. Cypher followed. Then Patricia. Then Bob and Carl, with Leo being the last one to jump. Gravity claimed him instantly. The wind surging past his ears as the vast, alien sky swallowed him whole. He didn't scream. He didn't flinch. He simply watched, calmly, as the ground beneath him grew closer with every passing second. The parachute rune embedded in his gear activated on its own, releasing with a faint pulse of blue mana. The recoil pulled hard against his harness, yanking him upright midair as his descent slowed drastically, the world below coming into clearer view. Beneath him was a flat plain, endless and desolate. The soil was the color of ash, not dirt, which looked soft and dry beneath a matte, faded sky. Tufts of grass sprouted across the land, but none that Leo had ever seen before. They were thin, sharp-edged, and a dusky gray-green, almost metallic in texture, swaying not with the wind but as if controlled by something within the earth. Thud! Leo hit the ground with a soft thud, the powdery ash kicking up around his boots in a slow, unnatural swirl. The grass near his feet didn't flinch. It bent gently, as though acknowledging him, then returned to stillness. Leo unhooked the harness in a single smooth motion and looked up. The aircraft that had delivered them here was already rising through the cloudless sky, its thrusters rotating, leaving behind faint concentric ripples in the air. Higher and higher it climbed, ascending toward the crescent seam in space that shimmered faintly above the gray sky. He watched silently as it reached the tier. The moment the aircraft crossed the boundary, it vanished without resistance, consumed by the red-violet slit in the sky. As a breath later, it was gone, leaving him and the team alone in this foreign world. Time-stilled world, the entry zone, precisely beneath the spatial tier. The descent into the time-stilled world had gone as smoothly as one could hope, but the landing hit like a curse. Carl was the first to collapse onto his knees, vomiting with a drawn-out gag that echoed through the stillness. The ash beneath him turned slick and discolored as he puked all over it, his hands shaking as he wiped the lingering drool from his mouth. "The air here, it tastes like rust and mildew," he complained while wiping his tears, as nobody responded to his whining. Nobody responded, because, although they weren't vomiting themselves, none of them felt entirely alright either. The air around them felt unusually thick. The mana in the air wasn't moving, not like back home, as it did not circulate or drift. The mana in this world seemed to cling onto their skin, behaving like a wet cloth that was pressed against a sticky wound, as it seemed to actively seep into their bodies and mix into their mana pools without them trying to absorb it. Leo stood silently, eyes narrowed as he kept observing the sky even after the jet had disappeared. His body felt heavier than usual, but it wasn't due to the gravity of the world, but rather due to some unusual force he couldn't understand just yet. Even breathing in this world seemed to demand more effort than it should have, as if each inhale drained 20% more energy than normal. Yet, strangely, Leo did not even note it as a drawback. Because when he tried to channel mana through his arm for something as simple as a flex, it dragged behind his intent by a fraction, like it had to push through a thick curtain before it could respond. It's harder to circulate mana here compared to back home, it's almost like mana doesn't want to move here, he thought, as the odd sensation of moving mana in this world made him feel much more worried as compared to labored breathing. However, having read about the dangers of circulating mana in this world, he stopped his experiments almost as soon as he began, as he did not wish to let the taint accumulate in his body this early into the mission. Meanwhile, Patricia muttered something about the sky making her nauseous, while Bob just reached up and tugged a strip of cloth tighter across his nose, uninterested in complaints. At the same time, Cypher and Raiden had already begun setting up the emergency fallback, as they tracked one of the supply crates they had kicked out of the jet and began cranking its protective shelling open. Crack! Raiden cracked open the supply crate with his bare hands, and inside he found wrapped within mana foam, a carefully placed transmitter rig, barely the size of a shoe when folded. The two of them worked in practiced silence, Cypher stabilizing the base while Raiden extended the antenna, as within minutes, they assembled the mana circuit and managed to activate the signal. "All right, listen up," Cypher said, turning toward the group. "This beacon is attuned to a specific mana frequency. All your supply kits have a sensor that can detect it. If we get separated, lost, or overrun, follow the pulse and get back here. This zone, right under the tear, is our fallback point." He tapped the side of the transmitter. "And if it comes to it, shoot your red mana flare once you reach this spot. A guild retrieval ship is scheduled to make a brief hover here every 90 days. They won't land. They won't wait. But they'll do a sweep and extract anyone who signals in time." Patricia blew a bubble and let it pop slowly. "Charming," she said. "So either we finish the job, or we hold our breath for 90 days. Preferably the first option," Raiden said. "But both require not dying first." The group shifted, checking gear, syncing the beacon's signal with their individual radars, and only once everyone was satisfied with their gear working, did they move on to the next phase. Come lend us a hand, we need to build a safety shelter around this antenna so that it's not accidentally destroyed by monsters or something else from this world when we are not around, Raiden instructed, as the team members began to carry the rest of the dropped supply crates one by one towards the antenna, before ripping it open and assembling the protective shielding. Leo and Bob held the massive metal sheets in place, while Patricia, Cypher and Raiden tightened the bolts to connect the panels. Am I the only one? Or does this place feel like a bad breakup to you all as well? Patricia asked while working, as her voice sounded low and oddly sultry despite the grit in her tone. You know, heavy, ugly skies, air that makes you sick, and not a single man to make it worth enduring. Except you, Skyshard, she added with a wink. Me having many days to seduce you into having sex with me might just be the only silver lining to this trip. She said, as Leo tactfully chose not to respond. Blurg. Carl, who was still recovering nearby from the change in mana density, let out yet another fresh wave of vomit, as the stale smell of his stomach acid made Bob squint in anger. If he doesn't stop puking soon, I'll personally pull his guts out. Bob warned, as Carl shuddered when he heard those words and immediately proceeded to cover his mouth with his hands. Give the kid a break, Bob, he's just a master tier warrior, Cypher said sympathetically, as Bob scoffed in disgust. Weakness disgusts me, he muttered silently, as Leo smiled softly at his words, since his messaging resonated with him as well. The assembly work proceeded smoothly, and soon it was time to affix the last roof plate, when suddenly Leo heard a faint dragging sound coming from behind him. His hand stopped mid-motion, body going still as he turned his head toward the shallow dip along the ridge behind them. Something is there, he thought, as he narrowed his eyes and scanned the terrain for any signs of threat, but only saw ashy fields and metallic-looking grass. Despite seeing nothing, his instincts told him that something was definitely off, and hence he did not look away but instead kept observing. For a moment, he felt the urge to use absolute vision and check his surroundings for threats. However, he felt apprehensive about circulating his mana in this world, especially when he did not have a mana stone in hand to draw pure mana from. Hence he instead slowly raised a hand, and held out 2 fingers to signal to Cypher to behind him that something was wrong. What is it? Cypher whispered, tone controlled but wary. Leo didn't answer. He simply pointed, eyes never leaving the stretch of ash and ridge that had gone quiet again. The others noticed the change in his posture and responded as well, with Raiden being the first to stand up in caution. Patricia stopped her bolt tightening, her hand drifting near her thigh holster, and even Bob stood on guard, chewing on his stick a little slower, as his eyes shifted towards the ridge where Leo was looking. 10 seconds passed, then 20. But nothing stirred. False alarm? Cypher asked, uncertainty lacing his voice, as Leo didn't answer right away. His eyes remained fixed on the empty horizon, every instinct in his body still on edge, as, no, he murmured, low and certain. Wait for it, he said confidently, just as a heartbeat later. Crash. Asterisk. Ash exploded. 3 beasts surged forth from the shallow ridge with gray scales, long limbs and spines bristling with warped bone and dripping saliva. Their heads resembled warped lizards, but they had more eyes than necessary and jaws far too wide for their natural design. These mutated beasts did not roar, did not hiss. They simply moved mindlessly towards their target in a vicious and direct approach, as they pounced on Carl in a sudden ambush. The poor boy didn't even have time to scream before they were upon him. However, thankfully for him, Leo was there to protect him before the beasts had the opportunity to bite his head clean off. Swish. Clang. Asterisk. Leo's blades moved into motion before the lizards fully lunged, the twin daggers slashing toward the first one's neck with lethal precision. He aimed to cleave deep, but the moment his blade's edge made contact with the beast's skin, sparks began to fly. The lizard's skin was too thick for his blade to penetrate. It had a rock-hard texture and was dense beyond expectation, as although his blade bit into it, the edge failed to go all the way through. Screech. The beast screeched and reared back, its body staggering, as it turned its focus to Leo. Shit, it's a tough-skinned bastard. Leo thought, as without hesitating, he spun and adjusted his grip, both hands now on the hilt of a single dagger, as his body moved with violent grace. He sidestepped the creature's snapping jaws, dragged his body's momentum past him, and then twisted around. Slice. Asterisk. This time, with both arms behind the force of the strike, his blade found purchase. It carved into the lizard's lower jaw and continued along the throat, severing its windpipe and flooding the air with blackish ooze. Clack. Asterisk. The beast spasmed once before collapsing at his feet. But before Leo could even recover his stance, and focus on the other beasts. Thud. Crack. Splat. Asterisk. The other two lizards had already been dealt with. Bob stood near Carl's shaking frame, each of his meaty hands clenched around a reptilian skull, as blood, brain matter, and broken scales dripped down his manly forearms. Beneath his foot lay the limp corpses of both monsters, as apparently, he had slammed them into each other so hard that their skulls had burst like overripe fruit. Silence. For a brief moment, no one moved. Even Leo found himself pausing, his chest rising slowly as his eyes widened at the sheer brutality of what he'd just witnessed. Raiden, Cypher, Patricia, they all had their weapons drawn, mana brimming at their fingertips, and yet none of them had made a single move. Because there was no fight left to join. Bob had ended it. Then, casually, as if smashing two mutated monsters with his bare hands was no different than tossing out the trash, Bob flicked one of the skulls off his fingers and muttered under his breath. I hate reptiles. Carl, meanwhile, let out a choked scream and stumbled backward, tripping over his own bag as his eyes darted from one mangled body to the next. I almost died, he sobbed, hysterical, only to get smacked on the back of the head a heartbeat later by the same bloodied palm. Thwack. Asterisk. Shut up, Bob said. Stop crying like a little bitch or I'll crush your skull the same way. He warned, as Carl immediately bit down on his own voice, too terrified to speak further, as he nodded frantically in fear. Bob turned then, his gaze landing on Leo. He tilted his head slightly, chewing a bit harder on the toothpick hanging from the corner of his lips. You moved faster than me. He muttered, not accusing, not impressed, just puzzled. Like he couldn't quite wrap his head around how someone had managed to beat him to the first kill. Leo didn't reply. He just nodded once in acknowledgement, his breath finally steadying as he wiped the blood from his blade. The others slowly lowered their weapons, eyes flicking from the corpses to Leo, and then back to Bob. Because in that moment, it became clear to everyone, that amongst them all, those two were the undisputed top dogs in this team. Leo frowned internally as the tension began to settle, his gaze slowly dropping back to the mess near Bob's feet. It was almost hard for him to believe that they were the same monsters he had just struggled to kill, as while he needed timing, leverage, both arms, and a perfect strike to take one down, Bob had simply grabbed them by their skulls and crushed them together, without mana, without technique, and without hesitation. He snapped their heads like twigs, Leo thought, eyes narrowing slightly. And here I had to try twice to carve through the skin. His mind flashed back to the old rumor, of how Bob had supposedly wiped out an entire enemy fortress using nothing but a kitchen fork. And although back then, Leo had dismissed it as an exaggerated war tale, he could almost believe it now after seeing that guy in action. Fucking monster. He thought worriedly, as he realized that perhaps killing Bob might prove to be the most challenging part of this mission in the end. Sigh. With a final glance toward the mangled bodies, Leo sheathed his blade and turned back toward the antenna post. Let's finish building the shelter fast. I don't think it's wise to hang around dead bodies for too long, as only Lord knows what the scent of their blood and marrow will attract in this cursed world, Leo said sharply, as the team didn't argue. Patricia immediately bent down to retrieve the last shielding panel, Cypher reset the protective rune matrix around the antenna, and Raiden silently stepped in to refasten the final corner brackets. Carl, still pale and shaking, picked up a toolkit without being told, because after that display, he wasn't about to be the weakest link again. No one spoke for a while. Only the soft clinks of metal, the hiss of tightening mana bolts, and the distant, unnerving stillness of the time-stilled world lingered in the air as in the next 10 minutes the team managed to build the signaling antenna and activated the protective mana shielding around it that would keep it safe from stray mindless beast attacks. Alright then, time to make our way towards the Forest of Death. It's about 140 kilometers away, westward. So if we start jogging now, we should cover the whole distance in about a day or so. If anyone wants to take a leak or have a snack, now's the time, because our next break will be after we cover at least 70 kilometers. Raiden said, as all eyes turned toward Carl, who lowered his gaze in shame, the dark stain on his trousers betraying everything his trembling hands now tried to hide as he covered his face in mortified silence. Time-stilled world, 23 kilometers from entry point, Flatlands sector. The team moved in a loose formation across the lifeless plains, boots crunching over ash-coated grass that gave no sound beneath their feet. Raiden led the way with purposeful strides, his eyes sharp and posture upright, as after every few steps he swept a cautious glance across the horizon, scanning for any imminent signs of danger. Patricia and Carl remained in the center, Carl hunched, visibly tense, while Patricia moved with the sway of someone who didn't know how to walk without being seen. To their flanks walked Leo on the right, and Cypher on the left, their steps measured, eyes constantly scanning for threats. Bob trailed in the rear, silent as ever, his massive shadow stretching further than anyone else's. Despite being a team, they all kept a cautious distance from one another, not just out of fear of being stabbed in the back, but because they were assassins by trade. They were used to moving alone, watching their own backs, and trusting it to someone else had never been an option. Tight formations were a luxury born of trust. And trust in each other was something they didn't share. Not yet, at least. As they moved, they all absorbed mana from a medium-grade stone that they held in their hand, as the pure mana from the stone diffused into their systems with every breath they took. The mana stones were essential to their sanity now, as without this stream of clean mana to keep their cores fed, their bodies were bound to start pulling in the corrupted mana of the time-stilled world, which would start to taint their minds. Even Carl, pale and shaken, clutched a mid-grade mana stone like it was his lifeline, his fingers trembling slightly around its edges, as he continuously drew mana from it to ensure that his core remained saturated. However, if there was one individual in the group who kept acting unaffected by the gloomy atmosphere, it was Patricia, as she kept trying to liven up the mood with her flirty jokes. Her long ponytail swayed lightly behind her as she closed in on Leo with a mischievous grin. "So, Skyshard," she murmured, brushing her arm against his for the third time. "Planning to be the stoic hero this entire trip? Or will you melt eventually?" she asked with a flirty smile. However, Leo chose not to respond. He just kept walking, absorbing mana from the stone in his hand and scanning the far ridge, as his cold attitude made Patricia pout. "TCH. Are you sure you're a man? I'm starting to think your man parts don't work. I mean, I've been flirting with you non-stop but you don't even have a slight erection," she taunted, as, "It works just fine," Leo replied without so much as even looking at her, as his voice remained as flat and cold as the ground beneath them. "Snort." Patricia snorted, feeling annoyed, before turning to Carl, who had been staring at the exchange like a deer in headlights. "What about you, rookie?" she teased, slinking up beside him. "Got any wild fantasies about having your way with the sexy assassin girl on this trip?" As, listening to her sexy voice, Carl immediately turned beet red. I wouldn't dream of," he began, as Patricia immediately cut him off. "Relax," she laughed. "Even if I go insane, I'm not fucking you. So keep dreaming, kid." The color drained from Carl's face as he heard the insult, before surging back, all at once, as he turned beet red and stared at his boots like they might offer an escape route. He looked like he wanted to vanish into the ash after that burn, as from the back, Bob gave a low snort, while even Cypher chuckled softly under his breath. Hours passed, and the terrain around the team remained flat, featureless, and deathly still. Despite the absolute silence, the team did not feel at peace, as something about this world's silence did not feel calming but rather disturbing. The silence here felt watchful, as if the air itself was spying on their movements. As this constant pressure created quite the stressful environment for one's mind to be in. Man, I hate this silence. However, I hate how colorless everything around here looks even more, Leo thought, as more than the silence, the lack of bright colors in this world began bothering him. Ever since they had entered this damn place, Leo had yet to see a shade of anything that looked bright. The sky was dark, the grass was gray, and even the blood of beasts they slaughtered here was dark and gooey. For as far as the eye could see, the world appeared muted and dull, with everything just looking like a different shade of gray. And although it did not sound like a serious problem when spoken out loud, it was in fact psychologically very disturbing, as for a normal mind used to seeing vivid colors, the sudden lack of any bright colors led to a psychological shock. I hope the forest of death has more colors, because if not, I might just have to give Carl a slice on his cheeks to see a streak of red, Leo thought, when abruptly, Raiden raised a fist. Everyone stopped as Raiden crouched near the ground, his fingers brushing along a pair of freshly pressed tracks into the powdery soil. Leo approached slowly, Cypher beside him. There, in the dust, were two distinct footprints. The left leg was a normal booted human print, heel, sole, even a partial shoe pattern. While the right leg was bare, with long, slightly bent toes, as if the individual leaving this print walked with one shoe half intact and one completely missing. However, more striking than the missing shoe print, were the two palm prints just in front of the legs. Someone was moving on all fours, Cypher noted quietly. Raiden nodded. They passed through here less than 20 minutes ago, and they're headed in the same direction we are. Patricia's flirtatious edge vanished as she crouched beside the tracks, eyes narrowing. You think it's another serpent? She asked, as. No, Cypher replied, firm and certain. Not a serpent for sure. Because according to the Journal of Psychology, it takes 300 days for a human to fully devolve into a mindless ape beast within a time-stilled world. Assuming that whoever entered here, held stable for the first 60 days or so, this print definitely belongs to a human who entered this world at least a year ago. And since even the earliest serpents to have entered this world can only be inside this space for a maximum of 200 days at this point when adjusted for time difference, it's safe to assume that these prints belong to a criminal or a rogue warrior that entered this world over a year ago. Cypher analyzed, as everyone looked at him with an impressed expression on their faces. These prints match the behavior of tainted humans, the ones who've absorbed too much of this world's impure mana. However, although they're no different than beasts now, it's observed that they're much more dangerous to fight than regular humans, so we should definitely keep our guards up, Cypher added, as everyone took a sharp breath. All right. If that's the case, then from here on out we walk with weapons at ready. From here on out, we assume that danger looms at every corner. Raiden instructed, as he drew his own dagger, with the others quickly following suit. For more thrilling fanfiction stories like this, check out my channel Fanfic Audiobook. Dive into epic adventures, mysterious realms, and legendary journeys brought to life through immersive storytelling. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more amazing audiobooks.